The first thing I learned about the apocalypse was the smell of a tool shed. Day 5, and I could tell you every scent in that box. Old rope, rust, dust that tasted like chalk when I breathed too deep. My stomach had stopped growling somewhere around day 3 and moved on to a low personal hum, like it was writing me a formal complaint. Outside, boots crunched past on gravel, and every single time, my whole body did the math. Stay still, breathe shallow, do not exist. Because in this camp, people who didn't pay taxes got dragged out and killed, and I was not just tax-free, I was a stowaway, which was one whole category worse. Quick version of how I got here. My name is Li Wei. Back on Earth, I was Special Forces, an orphan raised by the Army, the guy they sent when the mission briefing had too many red words in it. Then an earthquake opened the ground under my feet. I fell into a crack. I woke up in a wasteland under a sky the color of wet ash. No sun worth the name. No green anywhere. Just sand, wind, and the ruins of a civilization that clearly lost whatever fight it was in. I walked until I found a camp of survivors behind a scrap wood wall, and I did the tactically sound thing. I hid in somebody's shed and started stealing rainwater. The somebody was a kid called Jing. Jing was maybe 14, dressed as a boy, hood always up, and she found me on day 2. I froze with a water jar in my hand and ran through my options. None of them were good, because the camp rule for stowaways was public and it was permanent. Any normal person would have screamed for the guards. She looked at me, she looked at my dead, empty hands, and at the way I was standing between her and the door without meaning to. Then she left and came back an hour later with half of her own food ration, which, judging by her wrists, she could not afford to give a stray dog, let alone a full-grown stranger. I didn't take charity well even before I died once, so I paid. I built her a couple of snare traps out of wire and scrap, the kind that catch sand lizards while you sleep. She stared at them like I'd handed her fire from the gods. The next morning, her traps held 3 lizards. She looked at me the way you look at a broken vending machine that suddenly starts paying out. Then tax day arrived. The camp tax was food. Meat, specifically, delivered by weight, and the collectors did not do payment plans. Jing's lizards covered most of her quota, not all, and coming up short in this place had exactly one price. So she stood in her little dirt yard, dug into her coat, and pulled out her emergency reserve. A turtle. A palm-sized, black, deeply unimpressed turtle. Her big sister had left it with her before walking out of the camp 4 years ago to pay the family's tax in labor and never coming back. That turtle was the last thing her sister's hands had touched. Jing's plan was to hand it over to the collectors because a turtle in the pot tonight meant the guards didn't take her instead. I watched her hold that little animal and failed to let go of it 3 times in a row. Lift it toward the basket, pull it back. Lift, pull back. 14 years old, doing the arithmetic between her own life and the last piece of her family in total silence because crying wastes water. And that's when the voice went off in my skull. God-tier tamer system, binding complete. I'd love to tell you I reacted with dignity. I did not. I nearly headbutted a shelf. The voice explained, in the polite tone of a bank scammer, that I could now tame any living creature, inherit a version of its talent for myself, and evolve it using points harvested from beast crystals. Any creature, any plant, anything alive, from a war beast down to a houseplant. I looked through the shed slats at the doomed turtle in the doomed girl's hands. Give it to me instead, I said, stepping out. I'll handle the tax. She should have said no. She'd known me for 3 days, and I lived in her shed like a large, suspicious raccoon. She handed me the turtle anyway, because when you're 14 and alone, an adult saying, "I'll handle it," is the most powerful sentence in any language. I put one finger on the shell. Tame. Light crawled over the little thing, and words scrolled across my eyes. Rock armor turtle, level 1. Talent inherited, earth rock thrust. And then the part nobody warned me about. The system didn't just register the turtle, it upgraded me. Warmth flooded my arms, my spine, my legs, and my body quietly tripled its numbers like it was catching up on 10 years of missed gym time. I picked up a rock the size of a loaf and closed my hand, and it came apart into gravel. In the corner, the turtle blinked at me with an expression that said, "We're in this together now." Hold on to that turtle. That palm-sized animal was going to become the most important piece of real estate in this entire world. But right then, it was the size of a bun. Jing nearly stabbed it with a stick when it moved because her nerves were wound tighter than my snare wire. I paid the tax. Not with the turtle, with a stack of fresh lizards my new body caught before dawn, because it turns out that when you move 3 times faster than a sand lizard, hunting stops being a skill and becomes a shopping trip. The collector weighed the meat, grunted, and moved on, and Jing exhaled for what sounded like the first time in a week. Now, the world, because I'd been collecting facts through the shed wall for 5 days. This wasteland ran on a simple sorting system. There were awakeners, people born with one ability, fire, water, strength, whatever the lottery paid out. There were mutants, people whose bodies had changed, claws, wings, scales, animal ears. And there were ordinary people, whose main ability was dying young. Abilities meant rank, rank meant food, and no rank meant you built other people's walls until you stopped. Jing, under that hood she never took off, was a mutant. 2 long, soft, sky-blue rabbit ears, which she flattened and hid because being different in a starving camp is the fastest way to become the next scapegoat. I found out by accident. She ducked, the hood slipped. She backed into the wall with both arms over her head, waiting for whatever people usually did. I told her the ears were the best thing I'd seen in this entire gray world, which was true. She turned the color of a ripe tomato and hid inside her hood for an hour. From somewhere in there, a tiny voice informed me that I was weird. I decided I'd pass as an awakener, publicly. A man who crushes rocks raises far fewer questions than a man with a god-tier anything. I tested my cover story on Jing, who bought it instantly, because why wouldn't she? The plan was simple. Rest 2 days, then leave this dying camp before it fell over, and take the kid with me. She tore herself in half over it. Her sister had said wait for me, and 4 years of waiting doesn't switch off just because the raccoon in your shed makes good traps and better arguments. I didn't push. I just told her the truth, that a camp this week had weeks left, one way or another, and that we'd leave word behind for her sister, a message, a map, something. That promise mattered more than I could have possibly known. File it. At dawn, I went hunting and met my second employee. It was waiting in the rocks outside camp, a tricolor lizard, 2 meters of muscle and bad attitude, scales shifting color to melt into the ground. It ambushed me, which I respected. It missed, which I exploited. I caught it mid-lunge with one hand on its snout and gave it the finger tap. Tame. The system chimed, the lizard went from murder to devotion in one heartbeat, and its camouflage talent settled into me like a second skin. 2 employees, 1 morning, 0 salary costs. This system and I were going to get along. Then, on the way back, I heard Jing scream. 4 armed men had her cornered against the rocks outside the wall. Her hood was down, the blue ears were out. The men had that specific, ugly energy of people who've just found entertainment weaker than themselves. A mutant kid, alone, sport. They did not enjoy what happened next. I came out of the ground shadow at a speed none of them had a category for. The first 2 died before the sound of my footsteps reached them, necks turned, dropped where they stood. The other 2 found their spears pointing at empty air and then found me between them, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk. They talked fast. They were scouts for the Scarclaw gang, 500-plus raiders with a permanent camp to the north. The gang was 3 days out from eating this settlement whole. Walls, people, stores, everything. Then they stopped being survivors, too. I don't leave scouts behind me. Old habit, excellent habit. I harvested my first beast crystals that morning as well, little dense stones out of the lizards and one from a beast the scouts had killed. The system converted them into evolution points, the currency of everything I would ever build. My first balance was 100 points. Remember that number the next time I casually mention millions, because I remember it every single time. That night, I spent the points, both animals to level 2. The lizard grew half a meter and learned to vanish completely while standing still. The turtle grew from palm-sized to the size of a room. I stood in the dark, looking at that flat, wide, armored back. An idea walked into my head and put its feet up on the furniture. Chin could build a house on that. Not a shelter, a house. Walls, a roof, a door, a hearth. A home that walks away from every problem and outgrows every enemy. I looked at that shell the way other men look at land by a river. Jing found me measuring the shell with rope at midnight and asked, very carefully, if I was feeling well. Then I told her the plan. A moving house, a stove, a room of her own. Somewhere in my talking, her caution cracked, and this small, starved grin came out. She'd decided. She was coming with me. She informed me of this in the tone of someone granting a knighthood, then ruined the gravity of it completely by yelping because I'd reached out and tugged one of the rabbit ears. In my defense, they're extremely tuggable. This will come up again roughly 400 times, and I regret nothing. And then, over a shared dinner of grilled lizard, she said the thing that took the top off my heart and reorganized everything underneath it. She was working through her portion slowly, deliberately, the way she did everything. She said, without looking up, that she was saving the second half for tomorrow. I told her to finish it, there'd be more tomorrow. She looked at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. Then she quietly said she didn't really know what full felt like. 14 years old, didn't know what full felt like. Yeah, this world and I were going to have words. But first, the camp had a leadership problem. Scarclaw was 3 days out, and the camp's leader wasn't organizing a defense, wasn't planning an evacuation, wasn't doing anything a leader does. That silence smelled wrong, so that night I went over his wall to find out what kind of wrong. His compound was the only building in camp with real furniture, which told me plenty before anyone spoke. I found him mid-meeting, and the twist set the tone for this entire world. The camp leader had invited Scarclaw in himself. His deal was laid out on the table plain as bread. He'd open the gates and hand over his own people, the strong ones as recruits, the troublemakers first as examples, in exchange for a captain's chair in the gang. 500 lives traded for one job title by the man they all called Chief. I want to say I wrestled with what came next. I didn't. I've handled traitors before, professionally, and the procedure hasn't changed between worlds. I waited for the visitors to leave. A towel, so it was quiet. Then the neck, so it was done. Then I robbed his house down to the floorboards, and the man was rich in every way his starving camp was poor. 7 beast crystals, hundreds of points worth, swords, 5 rolls of real cloth, a wolf pelt, and, in a hidden box under the floor, the thing that mattered more than all the steel in the Wasteland. Seeds. Cabbage, tomato, vegetable seeds in oiled paper, hoarded by a man who let children eat sand. In a world with no green left, that little box was a dragon's hoard. I didn't fully understand yet what seeds were going to mean to me. I would. His servant Ming caught me on the way out. Caught is generous. Ming was busy stealing meat for his own escape because he'd smelled the betrayal on his boss days ago and had quietly wrecked one of the gang meetings already. Decent instincts, wasted position. I materialized behind him and ruined his entire evening. While he was still deciding whether to faint, I mentioned that I'd been watching him the whole time. Technically true, if the whole time means 90 seconds. He drew the conclusion I wanted, that I was always watching everyone, always had been, and his spine straightened like a soldier's. Then I gave him a job. Your leader sold the camp, I told him. He's been dismissed from his post, permanently. The gang arrives in days. At dawn, you're going to march every last person out of here to Moon Lake Tribe. Chin are going to keep them moving no matter who cries. He asked why I was helping. Fair question, since I'd been living in a shed like a cryptid. I wasn't only helping, I was also loading a trap. If the gang arrived to find fresh tracks, they'd chase the people. But if the tracks and the camp told a different story, a story with the timing I chose, then 500 angry raiders would sprint into empty sand while I strolled through their undefended base with a shopping list. Play with time. Oldest trick in the book, and the book has survived 2 worlds. Jing, meanwhile, had found stolen goods stacked to the ceiling of her shed, done the math on her own. Hidden all of it under sacking, because that kid was sharp as a thorn underneath all the shy. When I got back, she didn't ask whether I'd killed the leader. She asked whether I got hurt doing it. Different question entirely. Better kid than that camp ever deserved. My camp marched at sunrise. A long gray line of people carrying gray bundles. Ming at the front barking like he'd been born to it, off toward Moon Lake Tribe and, statistically, an actual future. None of them knew who'd arranged the departure. That's fine. I wasn't collecting applause yet. I was collecting a gang. With the camp empty, I got to work on the turtle. Level 3 cost a pile of crystals and bought me a monster the size of a basketball court, plus a new inherited trick, a rock spike the turtle could fire 100 meters like a ballista made of geology. But the real event was the floor plan. I drew it in the dirt with a stick while Jing supervised. 2 bedrooms, a main hall, a yard, a low wall around the rim of the shell so nobody rolls off in their sleep. Then I started stacking stone, and here's the part that still makes me smile years later. The turtle helped. It flexed its earth ability and fed me building stones one by one, the world's largest, slowest, most devoted construction assistant, occasionally turning its head to check my masonry like a foreman. We stripped the dead village for timber, doors, and roof beams. I built a hearth with a real chimney. By the end of the week, there was a stone house with smoke coming out of it, standing on the back of a living animal. I stood in the yard at sunset, feeling something I hadn't felt since before I died the first time. Ownership. Jing took exactly one thing from the old camp, the door of her shed, the place she'd survived in, the place her sister had touched. She hauled that battered plank up the shell ramp herself, refusing help, and leaned it against her new bedroom wall like a family portrait. I didn't say a word. Some cargo you don't tax. That week, I also tamed a spider, because the Wasteland kept offering, and I kept accepting. Red ghost spider, big as a dog, with a screaming face pattern across its back and the inherited gift of silk control, which sounds modest until you understand that silk is rope, thread, netting, tripwire, bridge cable, all of it now on tap from my own palms. First project, a web perimeter around the empty camp, anchored low, invisible in shadow, every strand a nerve that whispered to me when anything touched it. Then I taught Scarclaw's gang a lesson in reading. Trackers read a campsite like a diary. Warm coals mean the people just left. Fresh prints, shallow dust, they date everything. So at 3 a.m, I walked the dead camp, lighting fires in a dozen pits, scuffing fresh tracks, staging a departure. When the gang's scouts arrived after sunrise, the diary told them exactly the lie I'd written in it. The camp fled at dawn. Hours ahead, no more. Run, and you'll catch them before the tribe walls. The scouts sprinted home with the good news. My invisible lizard strolled along behind them like a tourist, memorizing every turn to the gang's base. The one scout who could actually read ground got a private meeting with my spider on the way back, condolences to his colleagues, none of whom could now check his work. And Scarclaw saddled 500 raiders and charged howling into the empty east after refugees who were already inside Moon Lake's walls, in the opposite direction. While they ran the wrong way, we lived. I want to spend a minute here because this was the week the family started, and I knew it even then. I drew a message for Jing's sister, charcoal on board, our house on the turtle's back, an arrow pointing the way we'd gone, the kind of message a person who never learned letters could still read. We sealed it in a box and buried it by the shed, with a marker stone on top rigged to a strand of my silk, so that if anyone ever disturbed it, I'd feel the tug from miles off. Jing stood over the little mound for a while with her ears flat. Then she nodded once, like closing a ledger, and took my sleeve, and we went home. I cut cloth from the dead leader's rolls and made everyone real clothes. I will not be taking questions about my tailoring. It covered the human body and had the correct number of holes. It rained one night, a real rain. We caught a full barrel, and Jing took the first true bath of her life behind a curtain with a kettle of heated water. She came out scrubbed pink and glowing, blue hair down to her shoulders instead of matted under a hood. Announced, with wounded dignity, that she had never smelled bad, that I was not to say otherwise. I said nothing, strategically. The point is, somewhere under the camp grime, there'd been this bright, pretty kid the whole time. The world had just been too busy starving her to notice. Meanwhile, north of us, Scarclaw was having the worst month of his career. Let me sketch the man, because he earned the sketch. A raider king with a dyed red beard and a paranoid streak wide enough to farm, who trusted no one, double-checked everyone. Ran his 500 through 4 captains he rotated, so none of them got comfortable. He'd chased a ghost camp east through a rainstorm, found nothing, and turned back with his column soaked and mutinous. On the road, one of his men spotted a big red spider shadowing them from the rocks. The whole column gave it superstitious side-eye and left it alone. Strange spider, the captains agreed. Don't touch it. Correct call, gentlemen. Wrong everything else. And me, I was already at their base. I went in at night, riding my lizard's camouflage, and the half-moon valley opened up its secrets one by one. The base wrapped around a central hill, 150 meters of it, with the boss's compound on top under a dome roof. His son held court below, loud and vicious. I filed him under later. and the compound itself told me who Scarclaw really was under the paranoia and the beard dye. A garden, a real one, cabbage beds, tomato vines, a small tea tree, dying flowers in clay pots. In this gray world, that little garden was a dragon's hoard, and the Raider King watered it personally between massacres. His bedroom held a sack of beast crystals that made my system purr, thousands of points in one bag. A hidden room held cured hides carved edge to edge with pictograms, old symbols in an old script, the kind of puzzle that says this world had owners before the sand came. I took those too. I didn't know yet they'd teach me how to build supermen. Patience. And then the storeroom, 100 barrels of water, and one fish. A fish, alive, in a tank, in a wasteland where men killed each other over damp gravel. It was called a crystal fish, and it condensed water out of thin air, endlessly, for free. That fish was the entire foundation of Scarclaw's power, the reason 500 killers followed one loud man, the reason tribes paid him tribute. Water is life out here, and he had a life machine in a cellar. Half the region would have burned the other half down for that tank. At least one tribe, I'd learn soon, had been hunting it for years, so obviously I stole it. And because I have a personality flaw I've decided to call confidence, I didn't sneak out. The son and his home guard caught wind of an intruder, so I sealed the storeroom door behind me with a few tons of stone, sat down among my winnings. Grilled meat while the gang screamed and hammered on the far side of the wall. Scarclaw's son worked himself toward a stroke out there. The smell of my dinner went out under the door to help him along. I want history to record it. They knew the thief was eating. Halfway through the meal, someone came down through the ceiling on my own spider silk. A figure in a hood, dropping into a sealed vault mid-robbery, moving like a knife, looking for a reason. We'd met once already, 2 nights before, outside this same base. A cold voice in the dark had offered me a partnership, said she had a map of the compound, split the take. I declined and walked into thin air on my lizard's camouflage. Judging by the pause behind me, she'd spent a while poking the air where I used to be. Now she'd tracked me into a stone box in the middle of an enemy base at the peak of an alarm. As a resume, that was excellent. She took the hood off, white hair, silver eyes, a girl of maybe 16 with crimson patterns climbing one cheek like frost made of blood. I knew what the marks were. Everybody in this wasteland knew. Void ghost infection, the slow death. The infected turn, over years, into the mindless things that haunt the deep ruins. Long before they turn, people drive them out to die alone because fear doesn't wait for symptoms. She stood in the torchlight with her chin up and her weight balanced to run, braced for me to flinch the way everyone had flinched her whole life. I looked at the crimson marks and told her they were beautiful, like flowers. I wasn't managing her. They genuinely did look like flowers, vine and petal, drawn in red down one side of a face that hadn't decided yet whether to be a girl's or a soldier's. And I watched something behind her eyes crack open, very slowly, like ice under spring, because in her entire life, I was the first person who hadn't stepped backward. Her name was Lynn. She left with me that night, carrying half my loot over one shoulder. If you're keeping score, that is how the deadliest archer I would ever meet joined my household. Not with a contract, with one sentence and a shared grilled dinner in a robbed vault. My exit was almost disrespectfully easy. Silk lines over the wall while the garrison guarded a sealed door with nobody behind it. Home caused the real problem, and it was a problem I couldn't punch. Lynn traveled with a dead flower. A pale, folded thing called an angel's wing, carried wrapped like a relic, because it was one. Its dew, called angel's tears, was the only medicine in the wasteland that slowed her infection. The flower had withered on the road weeks ago, and she was rationing what was left of its last drops. I asked her the timeline, flat, professional. She gave it to me the same way. The infection takes about 10 years to finish a person. She had half a year because she'd been burning her own life force in fights, spending lifespan for power the way you'd spend blood. Half a year. 16 years old. She reported it like weather. I put one finger on the dead stem, tame. The angel's wing stood up from the dead, stem straightening, petals unfolding, that pale bloom opening in my main hall like a small private dawn. The system chimed as its talent settled into me. I could now condense a drop of angel's tears myself. Panacea, suppression, time. Lynn looked at the living flower and stopped breathing for a second. Then she did something that told me everything about how she'd been raised by the world. She took out her family's spirit tool bow, the last object she owned that meant anything, and offered it to me as payment. Debt cleared, transaction closed. That's how her universe worked. Nothing was free, and she would not be owned by a kindness. I pushed the bow back into her hands. Chin'll need it, I said, because you're going to be guarding this turtle for a long, long time. She didn't answer. She just stood there, holding the bow with her jaw set wrong, the way people do when the alternative is crying. And that was that. Population of my turtle, 3. Scarclaw, meanwhile, came home to a house with no crystals, no fish, and no future. I'd like to have seen it. A gang that drinks because of one fish stops being a gang the day the fish leaves. Every man in that base could do the math on the empty tank. He tore the region apart for a trail, and his last good tracker eventually matched a thread of evidence to the mysterious guest who'd been living in the tax camp. From there, the ghost camp, the buried box, the wide, flat tracks of something enormous heading south. He gathered everything he had left and came after us in the night. Call it 400 boots. Which was fine. Between him and us stood a canyon I'd spent 2 full days renovating, and I renovate with intent. They called it a canyon on whatever passed for maps. By the time I finished, Death Canyon was honest advertising. The floor of the choke point hid a pit cave lined with stone spikes, dug by the turtle and roofed with the skin of rock, thin as a lie. The walls above held stacked slides of boulders on hair triggers of silk. I planted torches beyond the far end, a fleeing camp's lights, just visible, just out of reach. The gang poured in at full sprint, 400 men wide open at the throat of the world, chasing my torches. The canyon closed on them like a book. The floor went first, a whole company of the front rank dropping out of the world onto the spikes. Then the walls let go, and the sound of that many boulders in that tight a space isn't a crash, it's a verdict, rolling on for half a minute while the survivors climbed each other backward. One of Scarclaw's 4 captains, a man named Reese, got a boulder as his career summary. Half the gang stopped existing between one breath and the next. Scarclaw himself survived by wedging into a crack in the rock while his men were pulped around him, which tells you everything about the man. The instincts of a cockroach and the ego of a king. He crawled out, counted what was left of his army, looked south at the flat, wide tracks, and kept coming anyway. Cockroaches. Chin have to respect the commitment. Chin just don't have to reward it. We stayed ahead of him for 5 days, and honestly, those 5 days were worth more than the ambush. I started training Jing properly, push-ups until her arms shook, footwork drills in the yard, where a neck is soft, and why you never apologize for surviving. She complained precisely never, which worried me more than complaining would have. The revived angel's wing, drinking in the light of my growing tea tree, produced its first fresh drop of angel's tears. I watched Lynn hold years of returned life on one fingertip and drink it with her eyes shut. And one evening, watching her hover at the edge of the firelight like a guest who expects to be uninvited any moment, I lost patience with the whole arrangement and set it straight. This house is your house. Not for now. Not until. Stay forever. The girl who hadn't blinked at a sealed vault full of enemies stood there with tears running down her face in complete silence, and finally got out 4 words. I want to stay. So she did. Forever's going well so far. Also on those quiet days, Jing sat with me and described her sister so I could draw a proper portrait. Black hair, red eyes, cat ears. A face that, in Jing's words, always looked a little angry and never actually was. Remember that portrait. It goes off later like a landmine. Before Ling Tan tribe, 2 more recruits joined my payroll, and one of them changed the food supply of the continent. The first was the tea tree, Scarclaw's little garden tree, transplanted to my shell, tamed, evolved into something called a starshine tea tree, which cast a shimmering dome of light around itself, a starshine domain, inside which plants grew like they were being personally encouraged. I planted the stolen seeds under it and watched cabbage come up in days. My lifespan, which the system tracked like a bank balance, ticked up with every taming, past 900 years. I'd stopped reacting to that line. Mostly. The second was the crystal fish itself, tame. Water element, condensation, inherited, which meant the fish made water, and now so did I, out of the dry air, with a thought. In this wasteland, I had just become a walking oasis, and I decided immediately that this particular talent stays secret until it absolutely can't. A man with water is a target. A man who is water needs a very good cover story. Speaking of covers, the loot hides from Scarclaw's vault turned out to be the recipe book of a lost world. Secret medicine formulas, 5 tiers of them, brews that permanently strengthen an ordinary human body. No talent lottery required. Any farmhand, any maid, any kid made stronger by something I could manufacture. I looked at those hides for a long time. Armies are born from lottery winners in this world. Mine wouldn't have to be. There was one small comedy embedded in the treasure. The pictogram script needed careful reading, and it turned out that of my entire household, the count of literate people was 1. Me. Lynn could track a man across bare stone and put an arrow through a coin and couldn't read her own name. Jing could gut and cook anything with legs, same story. I added school to the list of things I'd apparently be inventing personally. Jing tried out the title of my future woman general, which she'd overheard and liked the sound of. The general was 4'0" and afraid of house guests. Give her time. Then my road ran out at Lingtan Tribe, 10,000 people behind real walls, an actual market. The best odds yet of news about Jing's sister. We parked the turtle out of sight, dressed in the good cloth, masked Lynn's face against infection panic, walked in the front gate under a cover story I invented between the gate and the guard. We're merchants from Xuanwu City. There was no Xuanwu City. I made it up. It sounded solid, a black tortoise of legend, a city of the north. Hold that thought, because I have never accidentally told a bigger truth in my life. At the gate, we collided with Lynn, the chief's daughter. Red eyes, fire ability, and zero filter between brain and mouth, every thought arriving at the volume it was born at. She heard traveling merchants and appointed herself our customs inspection, tour guide, and interrogator in one breath. Trailing her came a rich suitor named Hao Jin, whose personality was a wallet with anxiety, who looked at me the way small dogs look at bigger dogs. Lynn dragged us to a restaurant to grill the exotic foreigners, so I let the tea do the talking. Jing, tiny scam artist in training, performed a full ceremony with our Starshine tea, warming the cups, the pour from height, the works, all of it invented by me the previous evening and rehearsed twice. Steam curled. The restaurant went quiet around the smell. Lynn took one sip, and the tribe princess act fell straight off her face. She bought a box on the spot for 100 mid-grade crystals and did not even try to bargain, which I'd learn was profoundly out of character. Hao Jin then bought a box for 150, specifically so she would watch him spend more. The system dinged the take into 15,000 evolution points, and sitting in that restaurant, I quietly invented my economy. Everyone in this wasteland sells violence. Nobody sells comfort. The margin on comfort is infinite. That night, the tribe's actual power came to visit, and she didn't knock so much as arrive. Lord Ling, ruler of Ling Tan, a water awakener whose daily condensed output was the only reason 10,000 people were alive. A woman so composed she made exhaustion look like a style choice. Her ability had smelled mine, or rather, had smelled the fish. She sat down across from me in our inn like Winter taking a chair, told me, with flawless courtesy, to hand over the crystal fish. So I opened my palm and condensed a sphere of water out of the air between us. I'm a water awakener too, my lady. What fish? Watching a ruler recalculate her entire evening in real time is a luxury few men get. The fish was the only explanation she'd had, and I'd just erased it. She probed, I parried. She circled, I poured her tea. Somewhere in the middle of it, she stopped interrogating me and started, unmistakably, evaluating me for a son-in-law position, floating her daughter into the conversation with the subtlety of a siege ladder. I dodged with the agility of a man who has cleared actual minefields. She left with no fish, no confession, and one very thoughtful expression that I would come to know extremely well. And then Scarclaw hit the tribe that same night. The cockroach had tracked us to Ling Tan, and somewhere on the road he'd stopped caring about recovering property. This was rage now, pure and budgetless. He came over the wall in the dark with every raider he had left, and the night tore open into fire and screaming. Lord Ling met him herself. Here's what nobody in her tribe knew while they slept behind her walls. Scarclaw wasn't just a raider with a beard. He was a hidden mutant, a blood lion, 5th rank of power under the human suit. And Lord Ling had spent that entire day, like every day, draining herself to the dregs, condensing the tribe's water ration. She met a fresh monster on an empty tank. She was losing from the first exchange, and she fought anyway, penning his claws off her people with a shaking cube of water while her arms failed her. I arrived at the speed of finished patience. His son had Lin cornered against a burning stall, enjoying himself. Lin's arrow crossed 40 meters of chaos and closed his account through both eyes. And Scarclaw, terror of the wastes, king of 500, breaker of camps, got exactly one clean look at my face before my elbow went through his chest and a stone spike rose to finish the sentence. All that chasing, all those miles. Seconds. His last captain, a night runner called the Sting, made it to the wall and learned that my lizard owns the dark. Gang over, for good this time. And the tribe woke up to find the monster dead, their ruler bleeding, a foreign merchant standing in the middle of it all, trying to look like a bystander and failing badly. Chin'd think the tribe would celebrate its ruler surviving a monster. Here's what actually happened, and it's the scene that decided the next 100,000 lives, though nobody in it knew. Before Lord Ling's wounds were even bound, her council of elders assembled around her sickbed. Not with gratitude, with grievance. Who will condense the water at this rate, they wanted to know. How could she be so careless with her body, which, and they barely bothered to hide it, they regarded as tribal equipment? The woman had emptied herself for them daily, for years, then bled for them at night, and their response was a maintenance complaint. Lin went off like a munitions depot, cursing the entire council up one wall and down the other, while I carried Lord Ling home on my back. Princess Carrie was medically indicated. I want that on the record. I collected a complete set of jealous stares from my own household on the way, plus one mortifying moment where Jing, trying to be polite, called the most elegant woman in the region Auntie. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Lord Ling's smile stayed exactly in place, which somehow made it worse. Her name, once the title came off in private, was Su Lan, and the family chart had a twist. Lin wasn't her daughter by birth, she was her twin sister's child, raised as her own after the sister died. A fire element girl in a tribe that ran on water, which the elders never let either of them forget. Once her wounds were dressed and the room emptied, I gave her my honest diagnosis, because she'd earned honesty and had clearly never once received it. Your tribe is a body with 1 heart and 10,000 mouths, I said. The parasites on your council will drink you to death, and when you're empty, they'll sell your daughter to whoever bids. I walked her through 12 reforms that could save the place: water rationing, labor points, a guard answerable to her and not the council. We both listened to the silence where her permission to do any of it would have been. She sat with all that. Then she offered me the tribe, the whole thing. Lordship, her daughter's hand, both in one calm sentence, from a woman who had known me for 2 days and had watched me kill a 5th-rank mutant like a housekeeping task. I declined both, gently. I had a city to invent, and I don't marry strategically. It's my one economic irrationality. But I left her a sentence on my way out that I meant more than I let it sound. If the day comes when you can't carry them anymore, give yourself permission to be selfish. She didn't answer. She just filed it. I know now exactly where she filed it. Meanwhile, Lin went looking for an old friend in that tribe and found her mid-crime. Zhou Fun, alchemist, blonde, brilliant, infected with the same crimson marks as Lin, and down to 63 days on her clock. 63 days, and how was she spending them, you ask? She had dug a secret tunnel from her hut into the meat storage of the tribe's most upstanding captain, a man named Wei Guang. Was stealing dinner nightly, on a schedule, with a rotation system so the losses looked natural. A dying genius, coping via burglary. When Lin explained that we had a living angel's wing aboard, Zhou Fun wrapped her face in cloth so her marks wouldn't scare anyone, and sprinted to the meeting. She took one look at me over the wrappings. She developed an instant, catastrophic crush that would survive several city-states. Her friend Ingrid would later describe the symptoms to me verbatim. I've chosen dignity, so I won't repeat them. She signed on for the medicine, officially. Unofficially, my laboratory had just acquired its mad scientist, and the Wasteland's future pharmacology was secured over a plate of stolen meat. And then the coup began, and my quiet exit plans died of relevance. The elders moved fast once Lord Ling was wounded. Guards shadowed our inn, polite and constant. Captain Wei Guang, the burgled one, got tapped for suspicious night orders and confided his dread to his wife Hua. The man could smell a coup the way honest soldiers always can. It smelled like his own chain of command. I evolved my lizard to level 5, 10,000 points. It grew to 8 meters and learned limb regeneration. I parked it invisible outside the inn as our getaway bus, because when the board tilts, I like my exits pre-positioned. The full plan leaked to me through Hao Jin, whose loose mouth was the tribe's one reliable public service. The Great Elder had already sold Ling Tan, wholesale, to Thousand Trees tribe, the 10,000 people, as labor. Su Lan and Lin delivered to the Thousand Trees chief personally, as wives, or, in the phrasing that made my jaw tick, as water pets. Delivery at dawn. The buyers were already camped within sight of the walls. My response had 2 parts, and I performed the first one that same night, wearing my best manners. I robbed every elder in the tribe simultaneously. Call it collecting the bounty on a coup. Call it asset forfeiture. My lizard, my spider, my silk, and my earth-moving hands went through their compounds like a quiet weather event, and the hall explained the whole conspiracy by itself. These men had been skimming a starving tribe for decades. The crown jewel was the Great Elder's private greenhouse, a heated, watered, guarded green paradise the size of 2 football fields in a tribe where children licked dew off stones. I peeled every plant out of his soil in one pull of earth manipulation, beds and all. Somewhere in that stolen forest of green, I found sweet potato vines. I stood there in the dark, holding a sweet potato like a religious artifact, and in a sense, I was. Sweet potato is calories per square meter. Calories are population. Population is everything I intended to build. The elders had been hoarding the future in a garden, and now the future rode a turtle. The robbery also left my point balance north of 130,000, which brings us to part 2. At dawn, the Great Elder stood at the main gates with 300 hired hunters to hand over 10,000 people. In his way stood Wei Guang and about 15 soldiers, the ones who owed Su Lan their families' lives, who had decided, publicly and out loud, to die about it. "We're in her debt," Wei Guang said, "and we won't step aside in death either." 15 against 300, spears level, families watching from the walls. Su Lan walked out to join them, wearing her unhealed wounds like formal dress, ready to go down fighting in front of her people. And I genuinely believe she would have, and the elders were counting on exactly that. That's when I stepped up onto a rooftop, cleared my throat, and invited everyone present to move to Xuanwu City. The Great Elder laughed at me. "There is no Xuanwu City," he announced to the crowd. "No one has ever heard of it. The foreigner is a fraud," which is when the horizon started walking. I'd spent the night's 130,000 points on the turtle, and the turtle had spent them well. Level 6. 330 meters of armored beast, and on its back no longer a homestead. Walls, streets of stone houses in rows, a raised central plateau, my highlands, crowned with a green plantation and a glowing tea tree. A water channel, a well, a gate with doors. My fake city had become the realest thing on that skyline overnight. It came over the ridge toward Ling Tan's gates like a verdict with legs. The tribe's mourning went briefly non-verbal. 300 hired hunters remembered urgent business elsewhere at a speed that did their survival instincts credit. The Thousand Trees delegation, 2 officials named Yu and Tao, who had come to collect a tribe and its water pets, stood very still with the professional expressions of men recalculating their pension plans. And the Great Elder sat down in the dust of his own coup without being pushed, which I count as the morning's one act of self-awareness. I stood on the turtle's head as it lowered me level with the walls and repeated the offer. Xuanwu City is taking citizens, water daily, food for work, walls that walk away from your enemies. The gate is right there. Su Lan looked once at her council, once at the mountain of a beast idling outside her gates, made the decision I'd left the door open for since a certain sentence at her bedside. She chose selfish, and her selfish, characteristically, included everyone she owed. She walked aboard my city with her daughter, with Wei Guang and his 15 loyal men, with their wives and children and elderly, about 50 souls climbing the earthen ramp while the tribe watched in silence. On the way past the great elder, she paused, leaned down, asked him sweetly whether he'd heard the terrible news. Apparently, someone got robbed last night. I've recruited soldiers, alchemists, and monsters. I've never made a hire better than that woman. You and Tao did not interfere. Smartest thing anyone did all day. Population of Xuanwu City, day 1, 53. Plus 1 turtle carrying all of it. 1 lizard, 1 spider, 1 fish, 1 flower, 1 tea tree, and a leadership team of me. My city's first week was 50 people walking around touching things. They touched the growing cabbage and cried. They touched the well water and cried. Wei Guang got a stone house with a wooden door and stood inside it holding his wife like the walls might be repossessed. His daughter Wei Li, 13 years old and organized like a tax office, marched up the highlands the next morning and volunteered as my palace maid. She would become the small professional backbone of my entire household, and to this day I'm not sure the palace would survive her resignation. Su Lan shed her title like an old coat and appointed herself city secretary, which meant, in practice, that I invented things at breakfast and by dinner they had staffing, procedures, and a filing system. I stood up the operating system of a civilization in days. Contribution points as wages, a task board, an exchange where points bought food, cloth, tools, lamp oil. Work existed, pay existed, prices existed. Chin be amazed what that does to people who've only ever known tribute and fear. Backs straighten, voices come back. Zhou Fun got a laboratory with an actual door, took one look at the 5 tiers of secret medicine formulas from Scarclaw's hides, moved in the fullest sense, caught in the corner, meals delivered. And the angel's wing, evolved to level 5, now grew 5 blooms and dripped a drop of angel's tears every 5 days, enough to shove her infection clock and Lin's back by years per dose. Not cured, contained with margin. A cure was my long game, and I don't announce long games. I plant them and water them and change the subject. Lin left that week, and I hated every practical reason it made sense. She had 2 more friends out in the wastes, survivors of the same nightmare that made her, a fist fighter called Ingrid and a blade called Tanghua. A standing rendezvous at a place called 10-Floor City, 10 days there and back. Before she left, I forged her a parting gift at my new workbench, my first true spirit artifact, a bracer, and here's why that mattered beyond sentiment. Artifact crafting in this world is the art of finding the invisible energy channels inside beast materials. Crafters spend decades learning to guess where they run. My 1,000-thread silk control let me feel them directly, like reading raised print. I made an intermediate-grade artifact on my first attempt in one evening and handed it over like a sandwich. Across the yard, Su Lan, who had failed at artifact crafting for 3 years running, watched this happen and aged visibly. She has since forgiven me. Mostly. Lin took the bracer, stared at it, then hugged me, fast, like stealing something. Vanished into the wastes with a lantern beetle in a little cage for the dark roads. Which, lantern beetles. Let me introduce the most underrated employee in my entire menagerie. On a hunt with Wei Guang's new team, I'd tamed a firefly. Do not laugh at the firefly. Evolved, it became a shining beetle, and its inherited light control focused illumination into a beam that cut stone like cheese. My hunting team watched a bug delete a boulder and quietly updated their theology on the spot. And its offspring bred into lantern beetles, soft, steady glow, no fuel, no flame. I hung them in glass along every street, and the night my city first lit up, gold light on stone lanes, people came out of their houses just to stand in it. Kids played evening games for the first time in their lives. An old woman from Ling Tan told me she'd forgotten nights could be anything but a thing you survive. Streetlights. Remember them the next time someone tells you power is a sword. Power is whatever people can't imagine losing again. Now, far from all this warm lamplight, the plot was hunting us on 4 soft feet. A young woman was crossing the wasteland with cat ears, red eyes, and black hair. Beside her flew a blonde girl with bat wings and visible fangs, a runaway vampire princess named Mila, complaining at a rate the desert had never before recorded. The cat-eared one was being hunted by beast-headed men out of a place called Night Moon City over a stolen egg she carried. A thunder spirit beast egg. Property, originally, of somewhere called 10,000 Demons City, and never mind how it changed hands, we'll get there. Her road took her through a certain abandoned camp. She found a marker stone. She dug up a buried box and unfolded a charcoal drawing of a house on a turtle's back with an arrow. Her name was Ivy, Jing's sister, alive, armed, dangerous, and holding my innocent little message upside down in every way that mattered. To her eyes, the drawing said, "A strange man on a giant beast took your little sister. Here's his heading." She folded the picture with shaking hands, packed the egg, swore, out loud, to the desert, to hunt down the beast rider and get Jing back if she had to cut through everything he owned. So, inventory, as of that week. The sister we'd been praying for was alive. She was being chased across the wasteland by a beast king's hunters. She was carrying the stolen egg of a lightning god's puppy, and she was coming, with fixed intent, to kill me personally. The wasteland provides. It just has a sense of humor about packaging. Lynn's road turned bad at Maple Tribe. She walked into an ambush there, and I need to explain what ambushed her because it's the dark heart of this whole region. A void ghost, 5th rank, half-turned, still wearing most of a human face. And it wasn't wild, it was deployed. There is a power out here called Holy Sun City that treats the infection not as a plague, but as a farming method. They infect people deliberately. They raise the infected as disposable weapons, aim them, spend them, and harvest what's left. Lynn's whole old team, 4 girls, her, Ingrid, Manhwa, and one they'd already lost, were escaped stock from that program. Their home tribe hadn't just died, the way she'd once let me believe. It had been processed. The ambush went badly for the ambusher in the end because Ingrid arrived. Picture a pink-haired girl with a sunny disposition, a travel journal, and a punch like a landslide. She hit the void ghost mid-lunge, and the fight stopped being a fight. The two of them put the creature down together, arrow and fist. Stood over it in the rain, doing the arithmetic neither wanted to say out loud. Deployed here meant hunting them specifically. The program didn't forget escaped assets. And Manhwa wasn't at the rendezvous. Manhwa had gone into Holy Sun City, alone, on purpose, to repay a debt to someone inside, and, reading between the lines of the note she'd left, to die usefully while doing it. 16-year-olds from that program had a relationship with their own lives that made my old unit look sentimental. Lynn came home with Ingrid and gave me the whole file, sitting in my study with her voice gone flat the way it went when the memory was heavy. The infected assassin girls. The staged rescues. They'd fake saving a test subject from monsters so the subject would bond to her handlers, loyalty manufactured like any other product. The hybrid experiments. I listened to all of it without interrupting and filed Holy Sun City under pending because our route ran that way regardless and one of hers was still inside. I had already decided how that was going to end. I just don't announce these things. She'd have noticed the pattern. Ingrid, meanwhile, toured my city with her mouth open, cataloging streetlights, faucets, vegetables, hot dinners into a battered notebook, and announced that she was writing an adventure travelogue of the whole wasteland, and that we had just become Chapter 1. She then ate 4 servings at my table and declared the chapter would be long. I liked her instantly. Everyone does. It's a tactical problem when we need people to be afraid of us. The 2 of them plus my armory became something new that month. I'd been forging with my lizard's shed scales, and the result was full-body stealth armor, matte, ghost-faced, light as heavy cloth, and nearly arrow-proof, a set for each of them. I named the unit the Ghost Special Forces, Membership 2, and my city now had a covert blade to go with its walls and lamps. My first Tier 1 strengthening medicine came out of Joe Fun's lab the same stretch, 10 doses. Jing got one, Wei Li got one. My maids, in other words, quietly became stronger than most tribal hunters, which is the correct household security model, and I'll die on that hill. And we raised a flag, black tortoise on gold. The day it went up over the highlands, work stopped across the whole shell. I watched 50 people stare up at a piece of cloth like it was a sunrise. Wei Guang saluted it, and then looked embarrassed, and then did it again anyway. That's when I understood we'd crossed the line from a caravan to a country. Nobody salutes a caravan. My country needed people, and people were about to arrive by the 100, because our next parking spot was 10-floor city. Picture a city run by 10 families, called floors, ranked 1 to 10 in a pecking order older than anyone's grandmother, where your floor decided your food, your marriage, and how low everyone else bowed. And at the bottom of the pecking order, one young woman alone. Li Cho, 5th-rank cultivator, sole survivor of her family, which had died out over 3 years with a statistical improbability that everyone in the city understood perfectly and mentioned never. The other 9 floors were circling her inheritance like patient birds. Her council seat meant she got to attend her own dismantling in person 3 days a week. When my turtle walked up to their walls, a beast the size of a hill wearing a city for a hat, The 10 lords panicked in committee, and their solution was the oldest one in aristocracy: send the expendable one. They dispatched Li Cho alone as first contact with the ancient terror, on the theory that either outcome improved their position. She walked out to us with her affairs quietly in order. I know because she told us later. She'd assumed she was walking into a monster's shadow to die politely for people who wanted her dead anyway. Sulan met her at the ramp and served her tea. I watched the girl hold that warm cup like a live coal she was afraid to insult. I watched my secretary do her quiet magic, two women who'd both been spent by their own people, recognizing each other across a folding table. By the time I joined them, the negotiation had stopped being one. She wasn't an envoy anymore, she was a guest, and the 10 floors had lost the only honest voice they had. They just didn't know it yet. We didn't conquer 10-floor city. We hosted a dinner. I threw a banquet for the 10 lords outside the walls, our tables, our food. This is where I confirmed the law of the Wasteland that funded everything I built afterward. These people had power, crystals, slaves, and no cuisine. None. Scorched meat and boiled bitterness at every rank, forever. I put 10 actual dishes in front of them. Stir-fried cabbage with garlic notes from Joe Fun's herb bench. Tomato and egg soup. Seasoned roasted meat that had met salt and spice and patience. I watched 10 warlords lose their composure course by course. Watched a man who owned 300 slaves close his eyes over a bowl of soup like it was a religious experience. Then I opened trade, and the feeding frenzy made the tea sale at Ling Tan look like a warm-up. 2 cabbages bought 20 head of livestock from a lord named Alaric. Seedlings went at 12 crystals a sprout. Cloth came at us by the bale, nearly 200 rolls before sundown. Every deal fed my point balance, and my point balance was already dreaming about the turtle's next level. That night, the tea tree's dome lit up over my city, gold light spilling for miles across the flats. Beautiful. Also, functionally, a lighthouse for greed, and I knew it when I let it shine. Some traps you bait with fear, the better ones you bait with wanting. Very Tuesday, thieves came over my walls that night, which, as fishing goes, was a personal record. My catch included a 5th-rank treasure hunter named Tai Gen, a shape-shifting witch of the same rank, assorted professionals from several floors. One guest nobody had invited on paper, a void ghost, slipped in among the burglars to probe my defenses on Holy Sun City's quiet behalf. My night watch handled the whole harvest. Ingrid's fists cracked the ghost's guard in 2 exchanges, her new armor shrugging off a hit that would have folded a horse, and Lynn's arrows finished it through the eyes. The ordinary thieves got a gentler protocol. My spider webbed them where they crept, and by sunrise, all 32 were hanging off my outer wall in tidy silk cocoons, alive, humiliated. Drying in the morning breeze like laundry with regrets. I let them hang there all morning. Best billboard I ever ran. Because come midday, the wall display did its diplomatic work. Families arrived from 10-floor city to ransom their people, crystals in hand, and I offered them a better product than ransom. The debtors work for me, 5 years, wages after costs. And their families, if they choose, move in as citizens, full rights, because a man's crime shouldn't chain his wife and kids. 12 families said yes before dinner. Even the shape-shifting witch signed, muttering. I want it noted that she went on to become the best hotel administrator in the Wasteland, so let no one say I can't spot talent hanging from a wall. That's the recruitment trick nobody teaches. Every enemy is an application form with bad handwriting. Li Chu, watching all of this from our guest table, made her own move that day. It was the bravest transaction I've ever been offered. She emptied her family's vault into my hands. The entire inheritance of a murdered house, roughly 700,000 points worth of crystals once the system finished purring, in exchange for one service. Cover the escape. Get her, and the 500 retainers and dependents her family still owed protection to, out from under the 9 floors before the birds finished landing. I took the contract. Then I made most of it unnecessary, because that same night, I fed the turtle. Level 7, 1 million points. And the world changed shape. 1,200 meters long, 800 wide, 500 tall. My city's foundation became a walking mountain range, visible from every horizon at once. When 10th-floor city's residents woke and looked out their windows, the negotiation phase of history ended in that region. The 10 lords evacuated their own city by afternoon, in carts, on foot, in undignified heaps. Li Cho simply walked her 500 people out through the open gates amid the chaos, unhindered, uncounted, and unbowed, to our rendezvous point. The vault price for an extraction I performed by taking a nap next to a large turtle. She has never once asked for a refund. She got a city instead. I folded her 500 in over the following days, and the machine I'd built swallowed them smoothly. Houses with keys, a hot meal on arrival, names in a ledger, work assignments by skill. A veteran retainer named Zhang Hao took one look at our patrol structure and asked where to sign. His little daughter, Zhang Rui, got a bed, a bath, a fever cure in her first week, and Zhang Hao, a man built like a wall, cried into his soup about it. Li Cho herself got a courtyard on the highlands and a job title I invented for her on the spot, head of printing and books, because I had plans in that direction and she had the finest untrained mind I'd met in this world. Population from 53 to the high hundreds in one stop. The machine worked. Time to feed it a real war. But first, an army worth the name. On the road out, I reorganized everything armed into 3 companies. Wei Guang took the first, a steady man named Wen Yue took the second, and the third went to Hu Lei, formerly of the Wall Cocoons, a thief with a tactician's eye who repaid the trust by becoming the most paranoid perimeter officer I've ever employed. Takes one to stop one. Uniforms of spider silk, military crossbows from my new workshop, drill schedules, and my favorite training tradition, born that month. Night infiltration exercises. Lin and Ingrid versus the entire garrison. No warning, no lights. The first exercise, my 2 ghosts strolled through every sentry line and drew ink mustaches on the sleeping faces of the whole army, officers included. Wei Guang's own daughter shaved half his beard as a contribution to realism. The punishment parade of mustachioed soldiers running laps at dawn entered city folklore permanently. The second drill, some weeks later, went no better for the garrison because Zhou Fen contributed a sleeping pollen to the attacker's toolkit. The lesson wasn't cruelty. The lesson was, the dark is full of professionals. Be one. Also, mandatory literacy class for every soldier who got painted. My army learned shame and reading in the same month, and both stuck. Somewhere in that stretch, I also invented paper, and I want full credit, because nobody claps for paper. Papyrus stalks from the water margins, pulp, screens, soot ink, brushes, then carved movable type. Su Lan spent an evening carving mirrored characters and quietly revolutionized her own understanding of writing. My first print run was a storybook I wrote from memory, the legend of a giant who split heaven from earth, hatched from chaos. I titled it Chaos, priced it like a luxury good, and it sold out to people who couldn't read it yet. Li Cho read it so many times the binding surrendered. There are warlords in this wasteland with armies. I cornered bedtime stories, and I promise you mine was the better position. The city grew its permanent shape on that road, too. The trade quarter became a proper fortified district, and entry to the city proper got formalized through 3 stacked strongholds I'm still smug about. Heavenly Gate Tower at ground level, where visitors buy passes and get registered. The hanging pavilion above it, where weapons get checked and stored. And Shanghai Pass at the top, the last gate before my streets. 3 choke points, 3 ledgers, 0 exceptions, and every visitor who ever grumbled through the process was being told, gently, by architecture, that this city intends to still exist in 100 years. My menagerie grew twice at that stop too, in the livestock deals. A triangle-horned goat that evolved into a 6-horned magic goat, a prodigiously stupid, prodigiously springy ram whose wool reflects force back at whatever applies it, file that under armor materials, and a white snake that became my ice nether serpent, 8 meters of frost with ice manipulation in its blood. I installed it in a carved rock cellar and thereby invented refrigerated food storage. The beast naps happily at the center of its own winter. My meat and greens keep fresh around it. Every animal becomes infrastructure eventually in this city. It's a lifestyle, and one more hire from those weeks joined on 4 legs, a silver one with a crown. I'll give him his full scene shortly, he's earned it. For now, know that my city was about to acquire cavalry, and my mornings were about to acquire a rearrangement. Before we leave 10th Floor City behind entirely, I have a confession shaped like a business model. It's my favorite scam I ever ran, partly because every word of it was technically honest. The problem was pricing. My goods were the only goods of their kind in the world, which meant I could charge anything, which meant, paradoxically, I was leaving money on the table. because the proud rich hate paying sticker price almost as much as they love believing they've outsmarted someone. A lord who buys tea at full price got a product. A lord who thinks he stole the tea got a story, and he'll pay more for the story. So we invented the thief. Officially, Xuanwu City sold its treasures at magnificent, dignified, slightly outrageous prices. Unofficially, if a wealthy buyer sniffed around the edges of our camp at night, he might be approached by a mysterious hooded figure offering the very same goods, clearly pilfered from the city's stores, at a scandalous 10% discount. The mysterious figure drove a merciless bargain, insisted on secrecy, vanished into the dark with the crystals, leaving the buyer hugging his contraband and congratulating his own cunning. The mysterious figure was Sulan, my elegant, dignified secretary, in a hood doing character work. I want the record to show she resisted the assignment for a full minute and a half, then took to it like a duchess takes to gambling. Her thief had a backstory. Her thief had a limp, she added for texture. Her thief once haggled the Lord Alaric so viciously over a box of Starshine tea that he paid nearly full price anyway and thanked her for the privilege. She came home glowing with an artist's satisfaction and a sack of crystals, and made me swear the role would remain hers exclusively. It has. Some nights, when a big buyer's in town, my head of state disappears after dinner, and larceny walks the perimeter in her place. Government is mostly theater. Mine simply admits it internally. And the theater had a second act at 10 Floor City, staged the night before the Turtles Level 7 made everything moot. To keep the fiction watertight, the city needed to visibly hunt its thief. So while the hooded menace conducted her discount enterprise in one shadow, Lynn and Ingrid swept the perimeter in full ghost armor as my grim internal security. They interrogated the dark. They dramatically found traces. Once, they passed within 10 feet of the disguised Sulan and loudly vowed to catch the traitor who'd been bleeding my stores. 3 lords witnessed the manhunt personally. Sales of stolen goods doubled by morning. Ingrid wanted speaking lines added. I've held the line on speaking lines, but it's been a fight. Chin may ask, was all this necessary? Necessary? No. Profitable? Enormously. Fun? Beyond accounting. And it taught my inner circle the lesson I most needed them to carry into everything after. That in this wasteland, force is the most expensive tool in the box and the crowbar of choice for amateurs. We were about to face beast kings and body thieves and the landlords of the world. My people walked into all of it already knowing in their bones that every single game has a second board under the table because they'd spent a season dealing from it. My best cons, by the way, end in recruitment. Ask anyone at my dinner table how they got there. Before the story rolls on, that stretch of road owes you 2 pieces I skipped. Both built things I'd be standing on for the rest of the year. The first was the lumber run. My city ate timber, scaffolds, furniture, print blocks, and the stone forest's margins held real wood if you went armed. I went with the hunting teams and turned the trip into a masterclass. Silk lines hauling thousands of logs in bundles 100 men couldn't shift, my beasts doing the skidding. Around the night fire afterward, Ingrid opened her travel journal and paid for her dinner in Legends. This is where I first heard the Wasteland's deep gossip, and I logged every word. An underground world beneath the ruins, where things older than the sand allegedly still farm in the dark. The Oasis, a paradise city no one can find, where green things still grow. Dragons, plural, spoken of the way sailors speak of weather. And a tree of life somewhere at the world's edge, which every dying wanderer swears his grandfather's cousin once saw. Rumors, all of it, third-hand and shining. But I'd learned something about this world by then. Its rumors kept caching. I filed every one, and I can tell you now, sitting where I sit, that the file has paid out twice already and isn't finished. Ingrid also asked the question that night that nobody else had thought to ask, chewing her meat skewer, journal balanced on one knee. What do the ancient beasts eat? She said. The really big ones. A turtle the size of a mountain has to eat something, right? The fire crackled. Everyone looked at me. I said, points, mostly, and declined to elaborate, and the legend of the guardian spirit beasts of Xuanwu City grew another ring that evening, which was the correct outcome. An army that half believes its city is divine polishes its boots differently. The second story has 4 legs and outranks most of my human officers now. The teams found the wolf at a kill site that had gone wrong, a silver-furred giant torn up by something bigger, ribs showing, still trying to stand when we approached, still baring teeth at 6 armed men from its knees. Pride like that, you don't leave in the sand. I put my hand on it and did my thing and got more than I bargained for. Moon Wolf King. Royalty of the line, with a moonlight transformation in its blood and a pack somewhere out there that had scattered when it fell. I fed him back to his feet over days. When he was strong, he stood at the city's edge with his whole body pointed at the horizon and asked to leave in the way beasts ask. My household, who had adopted him with the ferocity of people who've all been strays, was devastated. I opened the gate. A tamed thing that stays because the door is locked isn't tamed, it's stored. He came back 9 days later, leading his entire pack. 30 adult moonwolves and 8 puppies walked up to my gate in column like a returning regiment. The king presented them to me with one look that said, "My people, your city, deal." Cavalry, delivered. Orchard security, solved for a generation. And my mornings permanently reorganized around a silver monster who greets me by attempting to knock me over, which he has never once managed and will never stop attempting. I respect a long-term project. Now, Holy Sun City and the girl in the cell. Manhwa's situation, when we finally got the full shape of it, was worse than capture. It was a plan, and she was the ammunition. Inside Holy Sun City, the survivors of the infection program ran a hidden resistance, led by a woman named Akemi, a fox-faced commander playing a decade-long game of trust against the city's masters. To buy Akemi standing with the leadership, someone had to be sacrificed to them, a prize, a captured deserter from the old escape. Manhwa had volunteered to be the prize. She walked back into the city that made her, let herself be handed over. They broke her arm on delivery and threw her in a cell, and she'd known they would before she went. Her goodbye to Akemi had been 3 words, "Don't grieve me." 16-year-olds should not be that good at goodbyes. My region had manufactured a generation of them, and I was done being polite about it. 2 days out, Lynn started feeling her friend's danger like static in her teeth, some bond between them from the program years. She came to me not asking permission, but asking for speed. I gave her better than speed. I gave her the whole city as a distraction, because Holy Sun City came out to meet us first. They had 3 great commanders, and the welcome committee was the bone one, Chen Long, 7th rank, a man who fought with a spear grown from his own marrow. As my mountain approached his walls, he planted a forest in our path, 1,000 white lances of bone erupting from the earth in ranks, very dramatic, very expensive looking, the Wasteland equivalent of a warning shot across the bow. I flipped the ground over, the whole forest folded under like weeds before a plow in one turn of earth. Then I leaned on my wall and called down that his greeting was interesting and that we were just here to trade. Nothing unsettles a strong man like being treated as scenery. He blinked first. And trade we did in the most weaponized sense available. Chen Long came aboard to scout us, escorted by a security team that happened to include, hello there, an undercover Akemi, taking her own look at the beast city everyone was whispering about. We ran them through the full tourist protocol, passes at Heavenly Gate Tower, weapons checked at the Hanging Pavilion, and, yes, Commander, the Bone Spear counts, grow a new one on the way out. And then the Gourmet Building, where 4 vegetable dishes dismantled a 7th-rank commander's composure in front of his own guards. The man ordered seconds with the expression of someone renegotiating his loyalties in real time. They left loaded with sweet potatoes and gossip. And the gossip marched through Holy Sun City faster than any army could have, because hungry cities talk about food with religious intensity. While the city pressed its collective face against our lights, my 2 ghosts and a lizard went over their wall in the dark. The prison rescue was almost an anticlimax, and I'd engineered the almost. The guards had thinned, half of them drifted off to gawk at the Wonder Beast parked outside, which is a core feature of owning a Wonder Beast. The hard part was never the locks. The hard part was Manhwa herself, sitting on her cell floor with a badly set arm, who looked up at her rescuers and refused to move. "The plan needs me here," she said. "I'm spent either way." Flat as a shopping list. And Lynn took the sacrifice apart with arithmetic, right through the bars, in that same flat voice, because they spoke the same dialect of damage. "The flower changed the math," she said. "We have years now, not months. Years mean you don't get to die as a distraction. Years mean you live and take your revenge personally with both hands when we come back here in strength." There was a long silence from the cell floor while a girl reorganized her entire relationship with her own future. Then Manhwa stood up. They came out the fast way, on lizardback, through the night streets. Because my girls have absorbed my instincts completely, they took a detour on the exit and robbed the private manor of the Shroud Flying Corps, the great commander who ran the entire Void Ghost program. Crystals, formula scrolls, and one buzzing cage that outweighed everything else in the hall put together, though none of us knew it that night. Bees. I tamed the queen the next morning, and her inherited gift rewired my entire approach to human resources. Sky King Bee. Talent, the Queen Bee Pact. A binding contract sealed in living energy, up to 5 sworn conditions, physically unbreakable by the signer. Loyalty, notarized by biology. Every defector, every hired stranger with a shaded past, every talent I wanted but couldn't yet trust, I could now onboard them all and sleep like a stone. Most rulers solve trust with hostages and fear. I solved it with a bee, and my way has better honey. The fallout arrived on schedule. The Flying Corpse noticed his manor was lighter by 1 prisoner and 1 bee colony. Sent the first squad of his program to collect. 6 half-turned Void Ghost soldiers, 2 of them 6th rank, moving in eerie sync. They caught me outside the walls, alone, at dusk. Alone at dusk is my office. Ice took the first 2 mid-stride. A water sphere swallowed the 3rd and 4th and froze around them. The 6th rankers actually made me move my feet, credit where due, and then the earth opened, closed, and finished the conversation. 30 seconds, no survivors, 6 crystals in my pocket, and I walked home whistling something from another world. After that, Holy Sun City sent management. Its lord came out personally, and the meeting opened as a fight, because at his rank you say hello with your ability and read the answer. He was a lava man. Molten stone answered him the way water answers me. His opening argument was a wave of it, orange hot, rolling at me off the flats with the confidence of a power that had ended every previous conversation it ever started. I met it with ice, and the collision threw up a steam wall you could have parked a tribe behind. He pushed harder. I answered with the full toolkit, frost to cap his melt, earth walls rising faster than his lava could eat them. Then, for punctuation, my 10-fold weight trick laid across his shoulders, enough to make an 8th rank ruler feel, for one long educational second, like a load-bearing column. The lava stilled, the steam drifted, and the Lord of Holy Sun City looked at me across the cooling ground, recalculated his entire afternoon, and proposed, warmly, that we talk instead. We talked. He pretended his city had always intended friendship, and I let him because his pretending was about to get expensive. He paid for the new friendship in 3 currencies. First, the infected. The whole colony of test subjects handed over to me, officially a gift, actually an evidence purge. Fine, I'll take your evidence. My cafeteria will feed it until it's a workforce. Second, information, and both pieces were load-bearing. The blood moon. Every 60 years it rises, and every sleeping void ghost buried under this wasteland wakes at once and tides across the land devouring everything. The next one was due in under a year, and above all these squabbling city-states, an organization called the Holy Land, 8th rank rulers all, an annual conference where the map gets divided like a pie. The Wasteland had landlords. I hadn't met them yet. Noted, and noted. Third, though he didn't know he was paying it, he sent 6 White Walkers to shadow my city when we left. I let them follow. Let the man feel informed. Information about me has a way of maturing into fear on its own schedule. Akemi led 25 infected defectors out through her tunnel on our last night there. Their exit got ambushed by a 7th rank flying corpse, the program collecting its property one last time. It existed, in my presence, for the length of one procedure. Silkbind, water sphere, freeze, shatter. Akemi watched the thing that had owned her whole life come apart like river ice, then watched her people walk up the ramp into a lit city that smelled like dinner. The onboarding did what my onboarding does. Cafeteria, 1 point, eat until full. Housing with doors that lock from the inside, which mattered to these particular people more than I can say. Jobs, wages, and a place in line like anyone else. I watched 25 human weapons stand holding trays, completely lost, while ordinary citizens showed them how queues work. And I watched Akemi do the quiet recalculation I'd hoped for, her decade of revenge re-aimed from a suicide run into a timeline. When we're strong enough, she told me, we come back for Holy Sun City. We. Fastest pledge of allegiance I never had to ask for. We posted the departure notice, and Holy Sun City threw a shopping panic that emptied half my shelves. A traveling bard hunter named Rowena bought my chaos book for her mute daughter and quietly booked long-term lodging aboard. That kept happening. People came for the food, stayed for the streetlights, and woke up citizens. And the sisters. I owe you the worst near miss in this entire story, and it happened right there, under my own lamps. Ivy and Mila had reached Holy Sun City during all this, still hunting the terrible beast rider who stole Jing. They toured my commercial street as anonymous customers. They ate at my gourmet building and nearly wept into the cabbage. Ask Mila, she'll deny it. And one evening, in the lantern crowd, Lynn walked straight past Ivy, half recognized the face from my portrait sketch, hesitated, lost her in the shadows between two stalls, and shrugged it off. Two sisters, 4 years of grief between them, passed within 50 meters of each other and walked opposite directions into the night. I found out afterward and needed a minute alone with the ceiling. Fate wasn't being cruel, as it turned out. It was just winding up for the reunion it actually wanted. I owe Li Cho's story its missing middle, too, because I compressed her from fugitive to teacher in one breath earlier, and the middle is where she earned the ending. When she led her 500 out of 10-floor city's collapse, we'd agreed to meet down the road, but roads out here bend. Her column reached Holy Sun City ahead of us and had to survive it. Understand what that meant for a young noblewoman with no city behind her name anymore. The slums. Real ones, mud lane, rag roof slums, where her people scattered into day labor, and she, a fifth-rank cultivator who'd owned a family seat on a ruling council, discovered that Holy Sun City had no work for her at all. That her savings were feeding 500 mouths at a rate with an end date on it. My ghosts found her there during our stop, thinner, jaw set, dignity fully operational, negotiating a water price she couldn't afford. The deal we struck was pure Li Chu. No charity, she'd had a lifetime's fill of owing. Instead, a contract. She became my advertising department. For days, she and Zhang Hao worked Holy Sun City's gate crowds and market queues with staged conversations about the Wonder City outside. The food, the wages, the lamps. They seeded word of mouth with the shameless craft of two people who'd both survived aristocracies and knew exactly how rumors climb. Traffic to my commercial street tripled, and her payment, negotiated by her, line by line, was citizenship for her 500, work assignments, housing. For herself, a courtyard on the Highlands and the printing house job. She drove a hard bargain for people who weren't her. A modest one for herself, and if you want to know how I pick my inner circle, that sentence is the whole test. She aced it without knowing she was taking it. The market shopping scene I promised comes later in the timeline, after the currency launch, but I'll place it here where her story lives. Opening week of the Shrenwu Great Market, and Li Cho, salaried teacher now, off-duty, shopping. She tried the free biscuit samples, tomato flavor, then star tea flavor. Bought a gin of the tea ones with a 20 yuan note, and watched the clerk verify the watermark against the lantern, both of them enjoying the ritual from opposite sides of the counter. She bought a gin of green salt at the ration counter, ID card presented. Marveled out loud that clean salt cost 5 yuan when the gray bitterness of her childhood had cost her family's servants 50 times that. She bought wheat and wheat flour and stood reading the printed how to cook card, her own press's work. Took it all home in paper bags to a courtyard she owned in a city that had never once asked her to be smaller. The last member of her old household staff, an aging retainer named Kalen, runs my farmlands now, the man who found the wheat. Her steward, Alara, keeps my cold storage. Her guard captain, Zhang Hao, is my patrol chief with the redecorated daughter's room. The whole loyal skeleton of a murdered house, re-employed, whole, under one flag, around the girl they refused to abandon. The 9 floors of 10-floor city wanted her inheritance. Turns out I got it, all of it. And it was never the vault. It was the people, and they came with her, and my city is the richer estate for every one of them. One more thread from that middle stretch, and it's the darkest one, so I'll handle it plainly and put it down. The Angel's Wing hit level 7 during those weeks, 7 blooms, a drop every 3 days, suppression in years per dose. I gathered my infected, Lin, Zhou Fun, Tong Hua, Akemi, the whole defector colony from the program, and told them where they actually stood. The marks on Lin's cheek had already faded to shadows of themselves. The colony's clocks, once measured in months, now ran in decades, and the disease itself, the root of it, I'd set as a solved-by date in my own ledger. My ledger, as the entire Wasteland was learning one arc at a time, has a completion rate. Nobody cheered when I said it. That's how I knew it landed. People who've carried a death sentence long enough don't cheer at reprieves, they just breathe differently afterward. The breathing was audible, and a chemi, who once planned to spend her one life as a distraction, asked what the colony's work rotation looked like, because futures need filling. Mine too. Let's get back to it. My reunion arc opened with a burglary, because of course it did. While we were parked near Holy Sun City, two figures slipped over my walls at night. Ivy and Mila, running low on funds and patience, had decided to scout the Beast Rider's fortress from the inside. Mila opened the operation by raiding a pantry, the vampire's priorities being eternal and consistent. They got as far as the Highlands before my night watch closed the net. Manhwa and Ingrid, invisible in ghost armor, ambushed them on the terraces. The fight that followed was short, loud, and one-sided in installments. Ivy was good, genuinely good, shadow-stepping, a technique she called her 1,000 shadow spears blooming everywhere at once. Against two of mine in full artifact plate, good bought her a fighting retreat and nothing else. The sisters. I used the word for the pair of thieves, escaped by air, Mila hauling Ivy into the dark sky, and they paid the toll fleeing burglars always pay. They dropped their luggage, most of it was trail junk. Two items were not. A large, warm, humming egg patterned in purple, and a rolled charcoal drawing of a house on a turtle. My people brought both to my study. I sat there looking at my own handiwork, the message I'd buried for Jing's sister, recovered from a fleeing intruder, next to a stolen thunder spirit beast egg that half the beast nobility of the Wasteland was reportedly hunting. I'm rarely handed the entire plot on one table. I savored it. Then it got better, because Li Chu walked in, glanced at the second recovered item, a small portrait Ivy had also dropped, a painted picture of a young girl, said, mildly, that she'd met that intruder before, and also, wasn't that a painting of Jing? It was. It was Ivy's most guarded treasure, a portrait of her little sister, printed lovingly from my own print shop's first commercial run, because we'd been selling copies of my sketch of Jing around the city like postcards. Long story. The point is, the pieces snapped together all at once, in front of witnesses. The cat-eared burglar was the cat-eared sister. The kidnapper she was hunting was me. The kidnapping victim was currently in my kitchen inventing a new soup. Jing came when I called, saw the dropped portrait and the drawing on my desk, went very still, ears straight up, the way she does when hope is too dangerous to touch. Finding Ivy again took days of the region's fastest gossip network, which I own. She'd gone to ground near Holy Sun City and been cornered there by her beast-headed pursuers. 3 of them, Lionhead, Wolfhead, and friends, the crew that had chased that egg across half the map. 2 invisible benefactors bailed her out at the last moment. My ghosts, operating under my standing orders to bring the cat home safe. Even then, she rendezvoused with an informant, learned her sister was in Xuanwu City, made her plans to come alone, quietly, still not sure whether she was walking into a rescue or a trap. She sent Mila away to a fallback point, the Oasis contact station in Flying Bird City, with instructions that if she failed, the vampire should beg the Oasis for help. Girl walked toward what she believed might be her death, for her sister, alone, after 4 years of running. Whatever else the Wasteland breeds, it breeds spine. Tanghua found her on the road and brought her in openly, riding my giant lizard, no bag over the head, no restraints, straight up the Highlands to my study, where Jing was waiting because I don't stage manage reunions, I just clear the room. Ivy came through the door braced for anything except what was standing by my desk. 4 years. Jing crossed the study like a thrown javelin, and the 2 of them went down in a pile. My study, which has hosted warlords, rulers, and monsters, got to host 20 straight minutes of 2 girls crying and talking simultaneously at double speed, 0 words of which were intelligible from where I stood, all of which were understood perfectly by both parties. The kidnapping accusation dissolved somewhere in the middle of it, replaced by Ivy holding her sister at arm's length, cataloging the changes, clean hair, solid weight, new clothes, unafraid eyes. Then looking around my study, my city, my face, doing visible math about what kind of place fattens and frees a rabbit-eared mutant girl instead of using her. And the comedy landed on schedule, because the truth about my buried message finally surfaced. The drawing of the man on the beast, the arrow. Ivy confessed, somewhat sideways, that she'd read it as a kidnapper's taunt and had spent months planning my death in some detail. Jing laughed so hard she fell off the chair. The rescue plans, apparently, had involved fire. They talked all night. Bath, tea, one bed, the way the deprived catch up. And in the morning, family business turned to my business because Ivy was still a wanted thief. Her stolen egg was sitting in my incubation room. She gave it to me. Formally, both hands, the way you settle a life debt in this world. For Jing's life, she said, the years I wasn't here. The Thunder Spirit Beast egg, mine. I want to be clear about what she handed over, since 2 entire city-states will eventually go to the mat over it. A Thunder Spirit Beast is a storm on legs, one of the rare spirit-grade lines, born with lightning the way fish are born with swimming. Under my system's care, fed on evolution points, the egg hatched into a purple pup that hit like static and grew, fast, into a truck-sized lightning wolf I named Little Z, 7th rank and climbing, fond of exactly 3 things: points, my hand on its head, and dramatic entrances. Remember whose property that egg originally was. There's a bill in the mail, addressed to me, and its sender is patient. Mila turned up 2 nights later, staging a 1-vampire rescue operation that deserves its own telling, and we'll get it in a moment. Before the 2 of them eventually left to report to Ivy's employers, she cornered me about the blood. Ah, the blood. During an earlier scrape, she'd tasted 1 drop of mine. Vampire logistics, don't ask. That single drop had blasted her to the peak of her rank and, this is the part she actually cared about, made her measurably taller. She was tired of the compact look, so she extracted a formal promise. Next visit, 1 more drop. I agreed, straight-faced, while my accountant's heart sang, because I had just put a vampire princess on retainer for the price of 2 drops of blood and a standing noodle tab. And Ivy, before she left, planted the seed of the end game. Her employers were called the Oasis, a hidden city, location secret even from most of its own agents, obsessed with one question: why the world's green died, and whether it can come back. She looked out over my highlands, at cabbage rows and a glowing tea tree and fruit saplings in nursery lines, said, quietly, that her masters needed to see this place. Yes, I said, they really do. And I smiled in the way that Sulan has since described as the old fox smile, which is slander, probably. 2 more beats from the sisters stay with us, because I promised you the rescue in full. First, the maps. Ivy, during her stay, had sat with me over maps and paid her room and board in intelligence, because the cat had crossed more of this wasteland than any of my officers. She sketched the Wanku Forest's interior, isolated peaks, storm corridors, where the 7th rank territories began. And she leaned over the southern edge of the map, tapped a valley I'd already been eyeing for its salt, gave me my first real brief on 10,000 Demons City. A beast king, she said, old and strange, marquises at the 7th rank, a monopoly on salt. A standing rule that beastmen abroad hide their faces. Don't go there casually, she said. I wrote it all down. Then I went there deliberately, but that's the difference between caution and preparation. I've built a whole city in the gap between those words. And the night before the sisters first left us, Mila staged the rescue. Understand the sequence from her side. She'd been sent ahead to the fallback point, while Ivy walked into the Beast Rider's fortress alone. Days had passed, and no word, because Ivy was busy being hugged and fed, so the vampire did the loyal thing and the dumb thing, which in her case are usually the same thing. Flew a solo infiltration into my city at midnight to extract her partner from my dungeons. I caught her out of the air over the highlands, mid-swoop, by the ankle. My interrogation lasted 11 seconds. That's how long it took Jing to arrive in a nightgown yelling her name, followed by Ivy in a robe with a bun still in one hand. The dreaded dungeon of the Beast Rider resolved into a dining table at midnight, with the whole household assembling in sleepwear to feed the intruder. Mila sat there with her wings half folded, a bowl in front of her, watching her kidnapped friend fetch her seconds, and performed the fastest threat reassessment in vampire history. By the 2nd bowl, she'd decided we were acceptable. By the 3rd, she was negotiating the blood retainer. I've signed treaties with less appetite at the table and less honesty in the room. The Holy Sunstop had a quiet epilogue I skipped. It's worth doubling back for, because it's where my garden grew teeth and my evenings grew comfortable, and both mattered. The teeth first. Among the loot and trade of that city came 2 strange flowers. I tamed both in one afternoon in the back garden, to the usual light show and the household's now ritual viewing party. The first was a sleepy little bloom that evolved into the mist flower, a black lotus as tall as a door, gorgeous, ominous. Armed with a drowsing pollen that puts everything in a wide ring around it gently, irresistibly to sleep. I planted it where an infiltrator's route would logically pass, and my security doctrine gained a flower. The second was a numbing weed that became the thousand thorn flower, a barbed vine the length of a street. I trained it along the cliff face of the highlands as a living wall. And because this world loves a bonus, it also fed my bees a nectar they adored. Defense in depth by gardening. Somewhere, my old drill instructors felt a disturbance and didn't know why. The taming session also produced one of my favorite discoveries about my own people. Handling the numbing vine bare-handed, Joe Fun took a scratch that should have dropped a horse, licked it, shrugged, and that's how the household formally learned what she'd mentioned to precisely no one, that my chief alchemist is immune to every poison she's ever met. That her research method includes tasting. I eat poison, she explained sunnily, and it makes me stronger. I updated her laboratory's safety protocols to a single line: protect the equipment from her. Moved on with my life, because some employees you manage and some you simply insure. The comfortable evenings, then. My city's first fully profitable day landed that week, over 1 million points of trade converted in a single sunset. I read the tally at my desk while the household orbited through its night routine. This is the part of the chronicle I'd saved from a fire, so indulge me. Wei Li on lamp rounds. Manhwa and Akemi arguing knife maintenance in the yard, which is how they say good evening. Jing asleep over a menu draft, ears folded like a closed book. And Sulan found me still ink-stained at midnight. She took the towel from the washstand and, with the same unhurried elegance she does everything, dried my hair while the numbers dried on the page. Neither of us said anything much. The silence had furniture in it. I have died once in another world. I know exactly how rich that hour is while it's happening. I evolved the shining beetle to level 7 that same night, feeling flush. 1 million points. My humble firefly became a 2-meter golden scarab whose light control could slice stone at range or floodlight a battlefield. Its glow joined the tea trees over my city, and light element manipulation settled into me alongside all the rest. My hands, at this point in the story, held earth, water, fire on the way, silk, ice pending, light, camouflage, healing dew, and the gravity of a small moon. The Wasteland kept sending me problems shaped like armies. I had become a problem shaped like weather. And one administrative beat to close the stretch because it paid compound interest forever after. The city's exam culture went permanent. Patrol officers tested before hiring, morality section included, and failed by exactly the people who should fail it. Workshop certifications, literacy classes in the evenings, taught in rotation, attended by soldiers under mustache-related sentencing, and, increasingly, by their parents, voluntarily, sitting in the back rows tracing letters because the children were learning and no adult in my city wanted to be read to forever. Li Cho ran the whole apparatus by then, printing primers on her own presses. The first time a grown stonemason wrote his own name on his own contribution slip and just looked at it, the ink still wet, my education budget justified itself for the next 100 years. Knowledge changes fate. I keep saying it to elders and kings, and they keep hearing philosophy. It's not philosophy. It's a supply line. The best one I own. And since we're on the subject of letters, the bookstore deserves its scene because it turned into the strangest profit center I own and the quietest joke I've ever played on a whole civilization. Li Cho's shop on the commercial street stocked exactly what my presses made, which was, at first, one book. Chaos, my retelling of a giant who hatched from the formless dark and split heaven from earth, written from another world's memory in an evening, priced like a relic because scarcity is a flavor. 30 copies of the fine edition sold in one market cycle at 100 mid-grade crystals each, to lords and merchants who mostly could not read them. My system counted the take at 3 million points, which means, I want this in the chronicle, that the single most profitable weapon I fielded that season was a bedtime story. The bone spears, the fireballs, the crossbow lines, all outperformed by mythology with good margins. The best reader, though, paid nothing and earned everything. Li Cho herself fell into that book like a well. She read it past the binding's endurance, recited passages while shelving, finally cornered me at the counter with the question of a woman who has located the water source in a desert. When does the rest of the story come? And I, author of one evening's work, promised a continuation I would then owe her for months. She has collected on that promise with the gentle relentlessness of a librarian holding your fines. So some nights, late, when the day's decrees are signed, I sit in my study, writing the further adventures of a myth. My bookseller will ask at breakfast. I like being ready. Power has many masters, mine reads. The rest of my press run was less romantic and more important. Textbooks, primers for the school, character charts for the literacy classes, printed by the hundred. For the first time in this wasteland's history, the price of teaching a child to read dropped below the price of feeding her for a week. And one more product, small, personal, and the origin of a plot twist you've already met. Jing's portrait, my charcoal sketch of her, printed as a keepsake run of 150 copies, some sold as art to citizens who found the rabbit-eared girl charming. One crossed a desert in a thief's breast pocket, the most guarded treasure of a cat-eared burglar. Dropped, eventually, on my study floor, where it detonated the whole reunion. My print shop has moved war doctrine, currency, law, and myth. Its finest work remains one little sister's face, delivered to the right hands by the longest possible road. Ingrid's travelogue, for the record, remains in progress, chapters accumulating in her barracks trunk, each city we pass earning its pages. She has promised the finished manuscript to my press, exclusively, at terms she renegotiates upward every time she remembers the arrangement exists. I've agreed to every raise. Wasteland Publishing is a small world, and I intend to own it the way I own everything else, gently, completely, and with the author well fed. My road out of Holy Sun City territory ran through the Wanku Forest, which is a forest the way a graveyard is a garden. No trees, stone pillars in thousands, sandstorms that ate the horizon, and beasts up to the 8th rank in the deep sections. My turtle walked through it like a renovation crew, shouldering the pillars flat and leaving behind a plowed, arrow-straight highway that would outlive every kingdom in this story. Merchants still use that road. Nobody sends me tolls. I'm choosing to see it as branding. Life aboard leveled up on that road. I want to walk you through the domestic stretch properly, because this is the part of my empire that actually wins wars later. My army got professionalized. Not drilled, professionalized. I gave them the speech about what a soldier is for, protection, not plunder, wrote it into standing law. Then imposed the full package, 3-shift garrison rotations, marching order, kit inspections, and yes, folded quilts, corners squared, every morning. A wasteland raider squeezes in his boots and dies surprised. My men make their beds, and the making of the bed is the point. Discipline is a muscle you train on small weights daily, so it holds under real load. Wei Guang took to it like a man who'd been waiting his whole life for someone to demand his best. Hu Lei grumbled beautifully and complied. My ghost special forces got reorganized and expanded. A tactical assassination team of 12, captained by Lin, Tanghua, Ingrid, and Akemi, all 4 in full ghost armor, and a new Highland Guard of 26 to hold the palace tier, equipped with a fresh invention out of my workshop, the Ghost Cloak Shield, a mass-producible cloak artifact that bends light around the wearer. I put invisibility into series production. Say that sentence out loud and try not to grin. I couldn't. I forged Lin a new longbow that stretched too, toed leg bone from the Moon Wolf King's tribute prey, tricolor scales, silk-wound grip, an advanced artifact where every loosed arrow lands like a siege bolt. She tested it at 300 paces on a rock the size of a chair. The rock retired. She turned around with the nearest thing to a grin her face makes. I made a note to never, ever stand at 300 paces from my own archer's bad side. And then Jing discovered starch, and I need you to sit with the gravity of what happened next. I rigged a stone mill. We ground sweet potatoes, washed out the starch, and I taught her the noodle process from my old world. Knead, press, boil, chill. Then the sauce, vinegar bite, chili warmth, garlic depth. The first bowls of sour and spicy noodles in the history of this planet came off my kitchen counter on a gray afternoon in a beast-haunted stone forest. My household went silent. Then it went loud. Lin burned her mouth and kept going. Sulan, who maintains elegance under artillery fire, had thirds. And I sat there, watching my people slurp and glow and argue over the last bowl. Made a quiet strategic assessment that I stand by to this day. Sour and spicy noodles were about to become the single most effective instrument of foreign policy this hemisphere had ever seen. Track the noodles through the rest of this story. Chin'll see empires bend around a soup. Mila, incidentally, drank her promised second, no, wait, her first official drop of my blood in that stretch, the one I'd promised. It kicked her to the peak of the 5th rank on the spot. She gained visible height. Her joy about the rank was polite, while her joy about the centimeters was operatic. She and Ivy stayed with us through the forest. My dinner table now sat, on a normal night, a water queen, a ghost archer, a mad alchemist, a fox-faced resistance leader, an ice blade, a fist with a travel journal, 2 reunited sisters, and 1 vampire measuring herself against the doorframe. I've commanded units with less personnel complexity than my kitchen. The forest also delivered me customers, because my lamplit mountain was visible for a night's walk in every direction. A wilderness merchant caravan, the White Liu Li Company, paid entry one night. 40-plus men under a 6th ranker named Thorin and his sharp-eyed deputy Keon. They toured my commercial street with the expressions of men discovering money grows on someone else's trees. Then they tried their big play. Glassware at extortion prices, glass being rare and fine out here. I let Thorin finish his pitch. Then I had Lynn's kiln team bring out our own glass, clearer than his. Quoted him our retail price, which was lower than his wholesale. The man, aged a decade in a minute, recovered like a professional. Pivoted to buying instead 100 lantern beetles, then another 100 with everything left in his purse, to resell in the far cities. First-rate instincts, that one. File Thorin under recurring customer, because he recurs. My measuring tools came out of that same commercial itch. Scales, standard weights, rulers, tape measures, protractors, compasses, a full standardization of weights and measures across my markets. I know exactly how a recap about measuring tape sounds. But hear me. Every fair market in history stands on the fact that a gin is a gin for everybody. Civilization is mostly measuring tape. Ask any empire that lost track of its granaries. We opened a proper pharmacy in the outer city too, healing potions at 10 and 20 points. The first week it existed, a patrolman's little girl, Zhang Rui, the fever kid from the Li Qiu migration, got cured of a burning fever for the price of a family dinner. Her mother stood in my street holding the empty bottle and crying. That story did more for my legitimacy than the walls, the wolves, and the army combined. Walls make people obey. Medicine at fair prices makes them yours. And through all of it, quietly, my exam system started. Patrol officers now tested for the job. 90 candidates, written law, practical work. A morality section, and only 8 passed the first sitting, 4 of the failures flunking on the morality questions alone, which told me the filter was working. Zhang Hao, the wall-built veteran with the cured daughter, topped the list and became my first patrol chief, with a little booklet of Xuanwu law to memorize and enforce. Murder, capital. Leaking city secrets, capital. Everything else, fines in contribution points, posted publicly, applied evenly. Boring, you say? Exams and booklets and tape measures? Friend, I have seen what the exciting version of government does to a wasteland. Boring is the treasure. Boring is what everyone out there is dying for lack of. I sell boring with hot noodles on the side, and the line around my gate never ends. Flying Bird City rose out of the stone forest like a postcard from a stranger planet. A city built on a 500-meter rock spike, 2 tiers of dwellings wrapped around the summit, reachable only by wing. It was ruled by the Hao family, who came by their wings honestly, hereditary flight mutants, and the family tree read like an aviary. City Lord Grimgor, 8th rank, 4 pairs of wings, a patriarch with the eyes of a man who has dropped enemies from altitude and slept fine. His heir, Xu Ming, 7th rank, 3 pairs, polite, sharp, permanently tired in the way of competent sons. And the daughter, Isolde, 18, orange-winged, sheltered like a greenhouse peach, whose introduction to my city needs its own paragraph. Their patrol captain, a flyer named Ronan, got scooped up as first contact and released as a messenger, standard procedure. Shortly after, the Hao siblings paid us a diplomatic visit. Tea in the reception hall, a city tour, all very stately, right up until lunch. Isolde met sour and spicy noodles. I have watched hardened warlords encounter my kitchen. Nothing prepared me for a sheltered sky princess hitting real food for the first time. She went through a bowl in silence, wing feathers slowly rising like a dawn, then looked up and asked, with the gravity of a treaty negotiation, whether more existed. Then she met roasted sweet potato. By the end of the visit, the ruling family of the Sky Fortress had a standing daily takeout arrangement, an actual servant with an actual basket, flying down from a mountain every day for noodles. Foreign policy, friends. Sometimes it's fleets. Sometimes it's a soup so good an aristocracy descends a cliff for it. The serious business was serious too. Air route trade, agreed. Water sales. And the crown deal. They'd watched our glass dome glitter over the city, sandstorms sliding off it like rain off a roof, and Grimgor wanted one. I built Flying Bird City its own glass barrier over the summit tiers, priced at 10,000 mid-grade crystals, raised it in a day. Theatrically staggered afterward, letting them believe it had cost me deeply. Never show a customer the real margin. Sulan filled their new cistern for 3,000 more. I swapped 3 fire feather eagles for 6 fruit saplings, a trade that will turn out, in about 4 scenes, to be the best deal either city ever made. My dome deserves its own beat here, actually, because I've been mentioning it sideways. It came from a dying beast the merchants had dumped on us at Flying Bird City, a crystal hide creature Thorin traded away cheap because it was fading. I tamed it back to life, evolved it, and got Xiao Bai, a 3-tailed white fox squirrel, level 7, whose talent is crystal manipulation, which in daily terms means the little glutton exudes worked glass on demand. Windows, tableware, lenses, pipes, and, at city scale, with my inherited version of the talent doing the heavy lifting, the Great Barrier itself, a transparent dome over all of Xuanwu City, arrow slits where I wanted them, a bee door for the hives, sandstorm season demoted to weather that happens to other people. The morning after I raised it, my citizens walked around under clear sky in a howling storm, touching the quiet air like it was holy. Some of them just stood there. I didn't rush anyone. And the eagle chick. The best trade of the era, as promised. One of those fire feather eagles was young, barely fledged. I did my thing, tame, feed, evolve, and got Little Feather, a firebird with an 80-meter wingspan, 7th rank, fire element control inherited straight into my hands. It parks on my highlands like a second sunset, and greets me by trying to preen my hair, which at that beak size is a trust exercise. It's molted feathers, though. That's where my workshop nights went. Fire feather quills, calcined at kiln heat until their energy woke, laced together with spider silk along their inner channels. I built through the night, feather to bone, and out of it came a pair of wings and a suit of plate. I dropped my blood on the array. The whole assembly fused and hummed. I had the vermilion bird armor, winged crimson plate that lets its wearer fly trailing flame. An hour later, because inspiration doesn't file overtime, I fanned 8 more feathers into a leaf of fire and glass and made the vermilion bird fan, a hand fan that throws fireballs the size of a cart. I tested it on a wall. The wall filed no objection, having left. Both artifacts turned out to resonate hardest with a fire element user, doubling their output in the right hands. There was exactly 1 fire awakener in my city, and she was already hovering at my shoulder, vibrating. Lin got the armor. Lin got the fan. Lin vanished into the sky for the better part of a week and had to be recalled for meals with signal flags. When she finally landed long enough to hold a conversation, I appointed her Air Force Captain, effective immediately, of an Air Force whose entire order of battle was her. She saluted, asked what an Air Force was, and took off again before I finished answering. Details, Captain. Details are coming for you, in the form of 50 flight regulations. Enjoy the sky while it's still lawless. 1 more recruit from that golden stretch, and it grew on a branch. A roadside tree whose fruit detonated on falling, tamed and evolved into my exploding tree. 50 meters of ornamental menace whose blossoms smell like jasmine, and whose juice powers demolition charges. My bees adore it. I choose not to think hard about explosive honey. Oh, and I invented eyeglasses. A woman came to my pharmacy with blurring vision that potions couldn't touch. I ground crystal lenses until the world came back to her. She stood in my workshop holding the frames and shaking. Nearsightedness. Not a curse, not an omen. Optics. Somewhere in my ledger, between the airline and the salt war, there's a line that just says, "Open a spectacles shop." Honestly, it might outlast everything else on the page. Parked 1,000 meters off Flying Bird City, we ran the best bazaar of the year. 2 farewells and 1 hiring campaign changed the roster. The farewell first. Ivy and Mila had a report to deliver to the Oasis about everything they'd seen, and obligations don't dissolve just because dinner is good. Jing packed her sister a mountain of vegetables and star tea, disguised as her own monthly benefit so Ivy couldn't refuse it on pride, an accounting fiction invented by a 14-year-old. I've never been prouder. Ivy entrusted Jing to me with a formal bow that made it a contract, and Mila hovered at the ramp, extracting her final terms. Next time she came, another drop of blood. Confirmed, princess. Fly safe. They went small against the gray sky, headed for the oasis's contact point. Jing watched the sky where they'd been until the lamps came on, then went to the kitchen and invented something aggressive with tomatoes, which is how she processes feelings, and the household ate her feelings. They were delicious. Their route crossed one more of my forward hooks, incidentally. At the Flying Bird contact station worked the oasis's local courier, an eagle shifter named Rowan, brown-haired in her human shape, permanently hungry in all shapes, who had already discovered my commercial street on duty hours and spent her entire savings on glassware and seedlings to haul home. The oasis, whoever they were now receiving my products, my prices, and my legend through their own supply chain. I didn't have to reach for the hidden city, I'd become its gossip. The hiring campaign was Sulan's idea with my wording, and it was beautifully simple. Overnight, my ghosts papered Flying Bird City's lower tier with printed posters. Wanted, spirit tool crafters, intermediate or above. Free housing, $300 a month, and all the water you can drink. In a city where the poor spat sand with every breath, that last line read like witchcraft. Half the tier gathered around the posters by morning. The ones who couldn't read got it read to them, which is its own kind of advertising. My posters caught 2 fish worth more than the whole net. Sisters, again, this story loves sisters. Elise, gray-curled, sharp-tongued, 20, with an awakener gift of X-ray sight. She could look into beast bone and see the energy channels laid out like a maze in glass. And Iris, 21, lavender-haired, gentle to the point of translucence, a born crafter whose hands did things with materials that made my own workshop pride sit down quietly. They arrived at my gates hooded, with exactly 2 crystals left between them, the entry fee. If the job didn't exist, they'd have been eating dirt by week's end. They both tested on the spot in my workshop, bone and shell. Both produced intermediate-grade artifacts inside an hour, a heart guard plate and a helmet, while I watched their technique and revised my staffing plans upward. Then, over settling in tea, their story came out, and my acquisitions list grew a new line in red ink. They were fugitives from a place called Future City. Their father had headed a workshop there, inside a program with a name I'm going to say once, flatly, and then keep walking. The Human Spirit Tool Transformation Experiment. Turning living people into equipment. Their father had broken at the final phase, taken his daughters, and run. The city's leadership intercepted the family on the road. Only the girls made it out, and they'd been running and hiding since, sleeping in shifts, never 2 weeks in one town. They took my job posting as a gamble because a moving city seemed like the one address pursuers couldn't watch. Correct, ladies. And one more thing, which I didn't say out loud over tea. Future City goes on the list. The list is long, the list is patient, and the list has never once been forgiven a name. The sisters got a courtyard on the Highlands' 2nd tier, salaries, a workshop with their names on the door, and my first commission, delivered as a sketch and a dare. A box that makes cold. They looked at my refrigerator drawing, looked at the ice serpent scales I supplied, had a working prototype in days, cold cabinet, freezer section up top, chill section below, 1 crystal lasting 10 days. Jing claimed the first unit for the kitchen before I'd finished inspecting it and immediately froze a tomato solid to see what would happen, science running strong in this household. And then, with the treasury fat from a week of Sky City commerce, I did the thing the whole year had been saving toward. The 3rd transformation. I posted notices across every district. At noon, the city transforms. Stay indoors. Do not panic. Then I stood on the Highlands, put my hands to the ground, and spent 10 million points in one sentence. The turtle went to level 8. There is no way to make the next half hour sound calm, so I won't try. The turtle grew tenfold. 10 million square meters of back. 1,500 meters of standing height, taller than the stone peaks around us, a geography with a heartbeat. And on the shell, my entire city rearranged itself while its people watched from their windows, streets pulling apart along seams, districts sliding whole to new positions, the walls splitting and re-knitting along the new rim at 25 meters high and 10 thick. I raised the Highlands to 5 stories of terraced stone, floors for officers, guards, offices, workshops, palace. I rebuilt the glass dome larger on 36 great pillars, stood in the sky at the barrier's edge, welding it shut with my own hands, while the wind screamed politely outside. The turtle's new inherited talent settled into me somewhere in the middle of all that. It was the one that rewrites what I am. Gravity manipulation. Weight. Mine to command. I floated off the ground in front of my own palace, to the visible distress of two maids, and hung there feeling the planet negotiate. Remember the gravity. It becomes the punchline of an entire city-state very soon. My fish leveled to 7 the same day and became a 30-meter reservoir spirit, water output for a real metropolis. The tea tree hit 8, its star domain now blanketing the whole city. Its new domain trick, mutation, would shortly start inventing crops for me. And the household spent the evening on the new 5th-story terrace, eating noodles on the roof of our own private mountain, watching lantern light come on across a city that had been a turtle the size of a palm within living memory of everyone present. Jing sat next to me with her bowl and didn't say anything for a long while. Then she said, quietly, that her sister would have gotten lost in the new streets, and grinned, and the grin wobbled. I put my hand on her head between the ears. We left it there. Some toasts don't need cups. I skipped a dinner back up that mountain that deserves the record, because the banquet the Howe family threw us was peak Wasteland diplomacy, and I think about it monthly. Grimgor hosted us on the summit tier to close the dome deal, formal affair, the whole winged court in attendance, and the Howe family, bless their sincere hearts, had prepared the guest of honor's table with the finest delicacy their kitchens could source, sour and spicy noodles. My noodles. Bought from my own commercial street that morning by their daily takeout servant, carried up a cliff, replated on their best glassware, served back to me with ceremony as the jewel of the feast. I ate my own street food off a lord's plate at a state banquet, while its inventor sat at home 2 kilometers away, probably inventing a better version. I kept a straight face the entire course, and if you ever wonder what my diplomatic training is actually for, it's for that. The deals signed up there were real, though. The air trade route, formalized. The glass barrier over their summit, raised while the court watched from the ledges. I performed fatigue afterward, leaning on the railing artistically, letting their whole leadership believe the work had drained me, because a customer who thinks the miracle cost you something respects the invoice. A rival who thinks it emptied you schedules his treachery for the wrong week. Sulan filled their new cistern to the brim. 3 firefeather eagles changed hands for 6 fruit saplings. And the ride home was the theater I mentioned, the rising sky road of earth unspooling under the carriage from cliff gate to city gate, 9 carved dragons catching the lantern light, wolf outriders in formation, while 2 cities' worth of faces watched from wall and window. Isolde watched us descend the whole way with her hands on the parapet, and, per multiple witnesses, said only, when we finally rolled out of sight, that she was going to miss the noodles like a person. Her brother promised to send birds down weekly for takeout. This is the heir and princess of an 8th-rank sky fortress, arranging noodle logistics at the state level. My export strategy in one image, forever. Now, the oasis itself, because Ivy and Mila's report delivery, is a scene I collected from 3 witnesses later. It explains everyone who knocks on my gate afterward. They flew for days, joined by Rowan, steering by an iron key shard that pointed home like a compass needle standing up. Home was up. Thousands of meters up, through a skin of illusion sky painted by the Second Elder's ability. Inside it, the legend of the Wasteland resolved into planks. A 3-tier wooden city on a floating core stone, drifting with the winds, every board weathered gray, half the houses under repair at any hour because the high wind never stops chewing. Research plants withering in barrels along the lanes, tended by botanists with gray faces and decade-old notebooks. Water rationed to the cup. The most beautiful idea in the world, running on splinters. Mila took the grand tour of paradise, looked around at the creaking boards, said, out loud, in front of her hosts, that it was worse than Xuanwu City. Because the vampire's diplomacy is pre-war, Gwyn, her escort, nearly fought her on the spot in defense of the finest city in the world. The 2 of them bickered about it across the whole wasteland afterward, and I'd eventually get to watch that argument end, but not yet. Ivy stood before the 4 elders in their council room, high wind moaning through the joins, and made her report. A moving mountain city, thriving green and open air, vegetables sold in market stalls like they were bread, a sacred tree that lights the night. And then she stopped talking and opened her pack. Set my seedlings on the council table, alive after days out of soil, leaves broad and shameless, twice the size of anything the oasis's barrels had produced in 30 years. The elders passed the little plants around in complete silence. Then the first elder, 8th rank at the peak and carved out of old frost, said the oasis would consider an investigation, which in elder dialect means the arrow went through the center ring. And Ivy, who is her master's student and mine in spirit, added her actual objective with a straight face, that she'd purchase the seedlings with her own crystals and would appreciate reimbursement. Her master approved the expense with her eyes smiling. Even in Paradise's wreckage, the paperwork survives. I've never felt closer to an organization I hadn't met. Oh, and one more thing happened in that wooden city that I didn't learn about until much later, and it's my favorite. Mila, touring the wind-hammered tiers, asked her hosts the obvious question. If the wind is the whole problem, why not put a glass dome over the city, like Xuanwu City has? And the whole escort stopped walking. Because the last idealists, 40 years aloft, had never once heard of such a thing being possible. Now they'd heard it from a bored vampire quoting my skyline. Ivy promised to raise it with the elders. That suggestion, tossed off between complaints, will bill out at more than most wars someday. Keep the receipt. So the oasis was coming to me, sooner or later. All I had to do was keep being unmissable, which is my resting state. Back aboard, my domestic engine compounded. My beast-drawn wagons went into service, 8-horned fang beasts in glass harness hauling the farm loads, nose rings fitted under the turtle's persuasive aura. The farm staff went from carrying baskets on poles to driving freight. My sweet potato logistics stopped being a limb-based industry. Jing invented pearl milk tea in my kitchen with honey, star tea, and beast milk. I contributed the straw, glass, custom blown, because milk tea without a straw is soup with ambitions. The first cups went around the palace, and the palace stopped working for half an hour. She opened an ice drink shop on the commercial street within the month. 5 drinks on the board, including a vegetable smoothie I count as a war crime, and she counts as wellness. She staffed it, trained it, priced it, and ran it. My shed girl. 14. A proprietor with a menu. I made Sulan a dress in that stretch too. Understand, this began as materials research. Crystal fish scales, processed silver white, silk bound. Then somewhere past midnight it had become a full gown, a qipao in gradient blue and white, scaled like moonlight on water. Incidentally, an advanced grade combat artifact because my hands don't know how to make less than weapons anymore. She tried it on behind a screen while I studied a wall with great professionalism. When she stepped out, I told her the truth, that she could topple kingdoms. She performed offense at the flattery while walking, I noticed, with 3 additional degrees of queen. She wore it to inspect the market. 26 separate citizens complimented it before noon. I know because she told me the number, casually, twice. My household's jealousy ledger updated on schedule. Jing saw the gown, congratulated her sincerely, and then stood in the corridor afterward, ears at half-mast, whispering to a wall that nobody makes clothes for her. I heard it because I hear everything in my own palace, and quietly reordered the workshop queue. A man with 1 forge and a household of women is a man whose scheduling errors have consequences no enemy can match. And Zhou Fen's lab crossed 2 thresholds. The healing line matured. 1 drop of angel's tears stretched into 5 doses of secret medicine at 70% strength, which turned a miracle into an inventory item. I drew up plans for an actual hospital. And her strengthening research pushed into the 3rd tier through the occasional detonation. One of them blew her workshop windows out while a maid was delivering tea. My chief alchemist emerged from the smoke gray as a statue, waved off all concern, and went back in before the dust settled. I commissioned the Crafter sisters for a blast suit, silk and reflection-processed goat wool, intermediate grade, fitted from measurements Lin collected by methods I did not audit. Zhou Fen received the gift like a knighthood and wore it while cooking soup. Safety culture. We're working on it. Which brings us to the day the departure notice went up. Xuanwu City leaves for 10,000 Demons City. I finally point this story at the Valley of Salt. Salt had become my quiet strategic ache. A growing city eats salt by the ton, curing meat, pickling vegetables, feeding thousands. The wasteland's salt was gray, bitter, and scarce, and the region's great deposit sat in exactly one place, 10,000 Demons City. Every rumor about it came pre-salted with fear. A hidden valley ringed by 5 mountains, a ruling caste of beastmen, Marquise is at the 7th rank, and a beast king above them all, old past reason, whom even the other legends mentioned carefully. We rolled south with the holds full of trade goods and the dome full of lamplight. I had absolutely no idea that the best villain of my career was down in that valley right now, dying on a schedule, or that he was about to look up at my city with an interest I would spend the rest of the year billing him for. But the road had one more stop first, and it's the one I carry closest, 100 Gao City. Write the name down, because nobody else will. It was a small settlement in the Wan Ku forest, maybe 1,000 souls counting everyone, built on a 10-meter dirt mound, and it ran on slavery, plain and administrative. Slaves built the walls, endlessly, 6 meters achieved in 3 years, because sandstorms ate the work as fast as whips extracted it. Slaves got 1 scrap of meat a day and a bowl of water every 2nd day, murky, sand bitter. 6 slaves got nothing, and the dead ones went over the wall. The lord of the place, a 6th ranker named Wang Fu, spent his nights in revelry and his days ordering the wall taller, flanked by 2 5th-rank generals who privately counted the days until he drank himself weak enough to replace. I want you to meet 2 people inside that arithmetic, because they're why this stop matters. Li, 1st-rank mutant, a laborer with perception sharp beyond his station, 3 years on the wall, cough gone red lately, 1 working eye's worth of luck left. And his daughter, Li Lin. 14. A short-haired girl who paved roads with her bare hands, fingers scarred over scars, who still said thank you to people, still, after that place, like a small, stubborn lamp nobody had managed to blow out. The beast tide hit them at midday. 200 beasts out of the stone forest, waves of them, 3rd and 4th rank in front. Behind those, worse, 5th rankers pacing, and in the storm haze at the rear, 3 6th-rank monsters that turned the whole assault from a raid into an extinction. Wang Fu took 1 look at the odds, gathered his generals and every single guard, and executed the plan his kind always has ready. They sealed themselves into a private bunker under the manor and left every slave outside to be eaten. Not 1 guard on the wall, not 1 gate opened for the workers. The city's owners simply decanted themselves into a hole and locked it. Outside, people with no weapons, no strength, and no orders were already dying on the ramparts. Li ran through the panic for his daughter, took wounds doing it, found her curled by a wall with her arms over her head. Slaves hammered on the inner gate the masters had locked behind themselves and got silence. A man beside Li laughed at the sky, empty as a bucket, because when the last door locks, some people are done, and nobody gets to grade them for it. That's when the ground started to shake in rhythm. My turtle came through the stone forest with a stride that reads on the ground as the end of the world approaching. The beast tide, being professionals of survival, took 1 collective look at an 8th-rank silhouette filling the sky and resigned from the assault, 6th rankers first, which tells you their management was better than the city's. The tide melted back into the storm, and 100 Gao's survivors, flattened, bleeding, deafened, looked up from their ruined walls at a mountain wearing a lit city. Waited to find out what fresh category of doom this was. My doom sent medics. My healers went down with potion kits and triage discipline, Su Lan directing in her blue gown like a verdict from a better world. Save the dying first, the walking can wait. My soldiers dug out the buried and finished the wounded beasts. Li was minutes from the far side when a top-grade healing potion went down his throat. Li Lin watched her father's wounds close and could not process it. She kept looking from the empty bottle to the medic and back. In her entire life, help had never once arrived. And then Su Lan stood in the wreckage and said the sentence that harvested the whole city. If you have nowhere to go, Xuanwu City is behind me. We leave soon. We won't force anyone. Silence. Then, 1 slave, one of the wall-broken ones, said, "What else do we have left to be tricked out of?" and started walking toward the ramp. And they came. Limping, carrying each other, 385 human beings choosing, most of them for the first time in years. My heavenly gate tower waived every fee on my order, and my soldiers, on standing instruction, did not hurry a single one of them up the steps. What happened at the top, I'll let one image carry. We set up water and food lines in the small square. A woman holding her skeletal son asked, trembling, whether she could possibly have a second bowl of water. Zhang Hao, my patrol chief, a man who'd carried his own daughter through a migration once, said, "Give her the bucket." Then had to turn around and inspect a wall for a while. Chief's business, very important, nobody comment on his eyes. They drank and cried and drank. Some of them sobbed like children over a piece of dried meat. My citizens, half of whom had their own version of this exact day in living memory, showed them where the lines formed and how the points worked and where the baths were, gently, the knowledge passing down the chain of the rescued like an inheritance. Wang Fu and his generals, for the record, emerged from their bunker half a day later into a silent, emptied ruin. The Lord screamed at the wind for his slaves to come back, and the wind declined to fetch them. I did nothing further to him. I want that noted, not as mercy, but as precision. There is no punishment I could engineer for a slave lord as complete as standing in his own kingdom after the slaves are gone. History occasionally has taste. I let it cater. The absorption took days and built my template for every rescue after. Housing street by street, families kept together, names in the ledger. An advance of contribution points so nobody started at zero. Work matched to bodies as they healed. And my identity card system launched on their intake. My invention of the week. Glass laminated paper cards. Name, features, address, and a unique number. Card number 1 went to Su Lan. She examined the little glass rectangle, listened to my speech about population management, asked, with dangerous mildness, whether this was my idea of a romantic gift. "It's laminated," I said. She kept it, I noticed, in the inner pocket. I count that one a draw. Lee healed. I made him keeper of my orchard, 100-point salary, and a wolf pack for colleagues. The man who'd built walls for whips walked his new green rows the first morning, touching the fruit trees like they might be a dream with a cruel ending. Li Lin, 14, marched up to Su Lan, volunteered for work, outstubborned her own father in front of witnesses, joined the palace as a trainee maid alongside a quiet girl named Gao Lin. Wei Li took them both under her small professional wing, reading lessons, cooking, etiquette, sword drills, because in my palace even the maids are a militia. The first time Li Lin tasted the staff meal, stir-fried greens and meat, free, seconds allowed, she declared, with her whole chest, that being a maid was the greatest fortune of her life. 3 weeks earlier, she'd been paving roads with her hands for muddy water. I went to the workshop that evening and worked on something loud until the feeling passed. My strengthening medicine went into both girls that same week, first-tier doses, impurities sweated out black, small bodies suddenly light and strong. Li Lin gritted her way through the burn of it without one sound, because pain that ends was a novelty she could respect. My palace gained 2 more people who will never again be at the mercy of a Wang Fu. My city rolled on south. Behind us, an empty mound with a half-built wall. Aboard, 385 new citizens learning that taps make water, and lamps make light, and school makes letters. That's the empire, if you want it in one stop. I don't conquer cities. I inherit everyone their owners throw away. Infrastructure Month came next, and I refused to apologize for how much I enjoyed it. Other rulers celebrate conquests. I celebrate plumbing. My water grid went in first. Glass mains from Xiaobai's production line, laid in trenches down every street, threaded, sealed with silk-based waterproof glue of my own recipe, gravity-fed from the Highlands Reservoir. Then household lines, then the fitting I was proudest of, the faucet. The first time a family from the 100 Gao rescue turned a tap and water simply came out, in their own kitchen, clean, the news traveled their whole street in an hour, and people came to turn it on and off in reverent little groups. I retired the word miracle that week for overuse. It's a tap. It will work tomorrow, too. That's the whole point of me. And the wheat. Oh, the wheat. The tea tree's new mutation trick had been quietly editing my crops. One morning, the farm manager, a careful ex-retainer named Kalen, showed me a patch of unfamiliar grass at the field's edge, worried it was a weed. I looked at it, and my heart did something complicated, because I'd have known those stalks anywhere on 2 worlds. I ran the star domain over the patch, watched it rise and gold and head out heavy, chewed a grain. Stood in my own field, getting quietly emotional over grass, to Kalen's alarm. Wheat, flour, bread. Noodles that aren't starch, tricks. Buns. Actual buns. I seeded it everywhere. 3-day ripening cycles under the domain. Warehouses filling. I taught the palace kitchen to mill flour, and then, on a slow morning, called in the whole female staff and demonstrated the steamed bun. Proofing dough. To an audience that had never met yeast is a magic show. Li Lin asked gravely whether the dough was asleep and whether it dreamed. Su Lan pinched a bun into existence with the focus she usually reserves for treaties. And when the first steamer opened, my family bit into the first soft, hot, juicy meat buns this world had ever produced. The table went silent in the specific way I have learned to bank on. Within weeks, there was a bun shop in the outer city selling 4 for a coin, with a morning line. Within a month, visiting dignitaries were being ruined by them on schedule. The bun joined the noodle in my arsenal. Nations fall to this stuff. Watch. Money came last and mattered most, and I promise this is the most exciting paragraph about currency you'll hear all year. Contribution points had hit their ceiling. Every trade needed a clerk and a ledger, and a growing economy strangles on that. So I built cash, real banknotes. My paper, milled from the sacred tree's own leaves, 10 times tougher than ordinary stock, and literally impossible to source outside my walls. My inks, Joe Fun's color-shifting formulas, blue that turns purple under beetle light, gold that turns sea green, brewed from herbs plus, again, my tree, unforgeable by chemistry. My printing, 10-layer engraved plates, raised patterns you can feel. Hidden in the layered design, visible only under lantern light, a watermark portrait of yours truly, so every counterfeiter in the Wasteland would need my tree, my lab, my fox, my face. Denominations from 1 UN to 100, turtle on the 100, tea tree on the back. Lin spent an evening in my study printing 50 yuan notes with me, layer by careful layer, handling each finished bill like art. Asked why the pattern stood up under her fingertips. Anti-counterfeiting, I said, which was true, and also I just like watching her be careful. Some evenings are policy, some are just good. My Xuanwu bank opened next to the patrol station, reinforced walls, guards in light-bending cloaks, and we ran the conversion in 5 days flat. I got to watch ordinary people hold engraved money for the first time, tilting the notes against lanterns like jewelers, counting their change twice not from distrust, but from pleasure. A worker's wife named Wei Shu repaid a neighbor's loan in crisp notes on opening morning and walked home visibly taller. The Great Market opened the same season. 1,000 square meters of counters, biscuits in 3 flavors, green salt, wheat, flour, glassware, fruit, all priced in the new money and weighed on standard scales. My patrol officers had to manage the first day's crowd. Not against theft, against enthusiasm. Small city moments from that stretch, because they're the actual treasure, and I hoard them. A teacher buying tea-flavored biscuits with a 20, and watching the clerk verify the watermark, both of them proud of the ritual from opposite sides of the counter. The bathhouse opening at Tujiao, a soak, and a mother and daughter, Wei Shu and little Zhang Rui again boiling their whole hard week away in the great pool, arguing about whether they could stay all day, deciding regretfully against, buying meat buns after. My night patrol eating apples on shift, on salary, under streetlights. None of this is filler, by the way, and I'll fight you on it. Every tap, every note, every bun is a bolt in the machine that lets me do the next arc's madness and have somewhere worth coming home to afterward. Empires that skip the plumbing end up as sand. I've walked through several. They don't smell like bread. My war stack grew right alongside, quietly, because I decorate with one hand and sharpen with the other. Glass grenades, thin-walled spheres of the exploding tree's juice, each one landing like a third ranker's full swing, cheap as bottles. The red ghost spider evolved to level 7, 16 meters of nightmare with a new inherited talent that settled into my own spine like a radar. Danger perception. The universe now taps my shoulder before it swings. The military crossbow lines upgraded weekly out of the sister's workshop. And the third-tier strengthening medicine finally stabilized in Zhou Fun's lab, 1 detonation and 1 triumphant gray-faced emergence later, which put an army of third-rank commons within planning range. Every private hitting like a champion, brewed, not born. A city that feeds people and can flatten anyone who interrupts dinner. That was the whole doctrine. We were about to test both halves of it against a valley full of monsters, because the Salt Road ends at 10,000 Demon City, and 10,000 Demon City had noticed us coming. 2 more pieces of machinery from the currency season, because both of them are load-bearing and one of them is a confession. The The confession first. My city runs on an intelligence service, and the intelligence service is two invisible girls with notebooks, Lynn and Ingrid, on rotating pre-dawn shifts in their light-bending armor, walked my streets unseen and wrote down my city's honest self, the version no ruler ever gets shown. Who worked, who shirked, who repaid a borrowed 100 points the morning wages landed, unprompted, at the exchange window, which is how the washerwoman Wei Shu entered my files with the highest character rating in the district. Which captain's households ran happy and which ran quiet? Wei Guang, growing into his rank. Wen Yue, brave and a little rigid, needs seasoning. Li Chou, spending more hours at the school than the print shop, which told me where her heart had landed and where her next promotion should go. And one morning's entry, in Lin's precise new handwriting, that the patrolman Zhang Hao's high expenses traced to him quietly redecorating his little daughter's room, which I read at my desk and approved as the best use of a surveillance state ever recorded. Say what you want about a lord who watches his people through ghosts. I'll be over here promoting the honest and heading off the rot before it costs anyone a finger, and my promotion lists have never once missed. Both faces, remember. The ledger sees all, and the ledger buys fruit for the patrol. It was Wei Shu's loan repayment, incidentally, that tipped the currency decision. Watching two workers need a clerk's ledger just to square 100 points between friends, I called time on the whole system that same day. Real money by the end of the month. The machine said, yes, man, and built it. The second piece is Zhou Fen's Ink War, which cost one laboratory window and was worth a navy. Color-shifting pigment doesn't exist until an alchemist makes it exist. My alchemist attacked the problem the way she attacks everything. All burners lit, sleep optional, blast suit finally earning its commission. Blue that turns purple under beetle light came easy, an accident off the Starleaf extractions. Gold to sea green took a week. Red fought back. One batch went off like a festival, blew the shutters open, and scared a tea-bearing maid halfway to the patrol station. The laboratory's occupant emerged from the smoke gray as a monument. She announced that the reaction was very promising. Then she went back inside before I could confiscate anything. When she finally delivered the full palette, formulas documented in her looping hand, she was so proud she vibrated. I signed the pigment works into existence around her recipes, staffed, secured. Sworn under the Queen Bee Pact, because the ink that guards a currency is a state secret with a smell. The paper side got the same lockdown. My papermaster, a careful old craftsman named Luo, showed me 3 trial stocks. The third, milled pure from the sacred tree's leaves, bent like leather and tore like it held a grudge. That's the note stock, I told him. Then I told him what the recipe now was, which is to say, a secret he'd keep to the grave, contract sealed, because a fortress falls fastest from inside, and my money is a fortress with my face hidden in it. He took the oath like a decoration. Good man. Prints beautifully, gossips never. And since we're back at the palace, one more workshop night, the one Su Lan calls the shoe incident, and I call applied ergonomics. The Qipao gown needed finishing, in my professional judgment, and the finish was heels. Crystal fish scale uppers, glazed tile, beast hide, a heel carved from polished bone. Yes, somewhere past midnight the pair had become an advanced grade artifact, because my hands have one setting. I presented them without ceremony. She went very still, put them on, holding my shoulder for balance, took 3 steps. Located on the 4th step, an additional 2 inches of queen she'd apparently kept in storage. The blood drop bonding revealed a lightness effect and a speed surge. She did 1 lap of the study, leaving little waterprint blossoms that faded off the stone, then informed me with immense dignity that she was going out to inspect the market. She inspected that market for 3 hours. 26 compliments, I mentioned the count already. She came home and told me the number twice, casually. I received it twice, casually, and the workshop queue for the household's footwear reorganized itself around a new political reality by morning. A man with 1 forge and a palace of formidable women learns to schedule the way other men learn to fence, parry, allocate, survive. I'm considered gifted. My fertilizer decision came out of an inspection day worth keeping whole, because it's the purest sample of my job I can offer you. I did the rounds by carriage. Wolves in harness, guards at the corners, the full civic theater. First stop, the breeding pens, where my farm staff raised 8-horned fang beasts and a stock of absurd gray lop-eared rabbits, half a meter of fluff and spring. They bred a litter a month. Per the keeper's shy testimony, they tasted better than the fang beast. Numbers small, trajectory good. Keeper praised, keeper glowing. Then out to the fields, where the manager, Kalen, 45 years old, one of Li Chu's old retainers who'd earned the post on merit, walked me down the rows with the fixed calm of a man escorting his employer toward bad news. The far plots told it themselves. Cabbage coming up small, tomato vines pale. Kalen braced for blame, and I knelt, took a handful of soil, ran my earth sense through it, and gave him the verdict. Not your fault. The land's tired. We'd been sprinting these fields under the star domain, harvest after harvest. The soil's pantry had run empty, and there's no ability in my entire collection that conjures nutrients from nothing. Then I explained the fix, and I watched a grown farm manager's soul briefly leave his body. Collect it, I said, from the city, from the pens, all of it. Cart it here and feed the fields. Kalen asked me, with the care of a man double-checking an execution order, whether I meant what he thought I meant. I confirmed it. He asked faintly whether food grown that way could possibly be, and searched for the diplomatic term, good. I gave him the 2-minute lecture on composting, sealed pits, ash and soil and time, and invisible workers turning waste back into wealth, the oldest recycling program in any world. He listened with his face doing slow, brave things. At the end, he squared up like a soldier and said he'd arrange the carts today. He did, too. Within the season, my septic system, compost yards, and fertilizer schedule were running like a mill. The pale plots came back deep green. Kalen, who now lectures new farmhands on soil nutrition with the zeal of a convert, has never once used the diplomatic term again. My civic list from those weeks, quickly, because each line is a scene I lived and a wall someone else no longer dies behind. The water-powered gate mechanisms at the fortress line, wheel and gear, so my gates open on current instead of muscle. Glass helmets for the storm belt crews, sealed against sand, an invention born the day Lynn mentioned, mid-ride, that people who live in the wind country would need them, because my archer designs civic equipment between shots now, and I've stopped being surprised. Beast-drawn freight schedules. A magnifying glass for every fine work bench, and a telescope for every watchtower, ground from Xiaobai's clearest stock, my sentries now reading the horizon an hour deeper in every direction. And my identity card ledger crossed its first 1,000 entries that season, 1,000 people whose names were now facts in a book, not sounds a master could erase. When the registrar reported the milestone at council, my whole senior staff sat with the number a moment longer than the agenda required. Veterans of tribes and slave pits and murdered houses. Every one of them once erasable. Then Sulan turned the page and read the next item, because that's the discipline that builds the world where the number keeps growing. I run a sentimental city. We file it under infrastructure. They'd noticed us because I'd been leaving witnesses on purpose, and one set of witnesses had finally reached the right desk. Remember the 3 beast-headed hunters who chased Ivy across the map for her stolen egg? Lionhead, his name was Leaf, Wolfhead, Bryn, plus a colleague they'd since misplaced. Months back, they'd tracked the egg to my city and not dared enter. They'd finally slunk home to 10,000 Demon City to report the loss upward. Upward meant a marquee, and the marquee they reported to now enters the story properly. Night Prowler. One of the 3 marquises of 10,000 Demon City, wolf's head on a man's shoulders, 7th rank, patient, political, the one in any room who watches the exits. He heard the hunter's story, weighed the career risk of ignoring it against the career risk of bothering the throne with it. Set out personally to verify, dragging Leaf and Bryn along as evidence. What his scouting party found, camped one evening in the Badlands, was the ground shaking. Then my level 8 turtle walking past their hiding place like a moving mountain range, wearing a glowing city, casting starlight. Night Prowler, to his considerable credit, did the math instantly. That beast outranks me. Its master outranks the beast. We are not retrieving anything from that. And then the second math, colder. It's heading toward our valley. He ran home ahead of us to warn his king, and so we arrive, at last, at the desk where all the reports were landing. Let me introduce Rathar properly, because he's the best villain this wasteland ever grew, and he earned a real introduction. Beast King of 10,000 Demon City. 5 meters of scaled muscle, horns, lizard claws, an 8th rank aura that made his own marquises breathe carefully. Officially, 120 years old. Actually, over 300. Because Rathar's awakened ability was the nastiest trick in the setting. He could see souls, read their wavelengths like a jeweler reads stones. When he found a body whose wavelength matched his own closely enough, he could move in, soul transfer. He'd already worn out and replaced 2 bodies. The kings of 10,000 Demon City had always been sudden, always hand-raised by their predecessor, always fully beast-formed. Same tenant, new addresses, and the current address was condemned. His body was aging fast now, strength bleeding out of him season by season, his 8th rank sliding toward the top of 7th, and every fit of temper accelerated the rot, which made him something far more dangerous than a tyrant. A dying tyrant, shopping. His shopping list had one item, a thunder spirit beast. He'd located an egg of that rare line years ago, measured its wavelength at 90% match, the best fit he'd found in 3 centuries, and had it brought toward his city. Somewhere on that road, a cat-eared thief working for parties unknown lifted it. Chin know the rest. The egg crossed the wasteland, changed hands in a night skirmish, hatched in my back garden into little Z, my truck-sized lightning wolf, who at that very moment was asleep under my tea tree with its paws twitching. My city parked across the mouth of his valley, the only entrance, 1,000 meters wide, with a mountain range's worth of turtle. Not a siege, we genuinely didn't fit inside, but I'd have paid to see the view from his walls. The valley itself explained the city's whole economy at a glance. 5 mountains stood around it like the fingers of a half-closed fist. All 5 were salt, raw salt in cliffs, the region's entire supply in one geological accident. Below, a city of 50,000, ordinary humans in the outer ring. An inner city of beastmen, the ruling caste, a few hundred beast-headed nobles who covered their features in black robes whenever they traveled, on the king's standing order. Rathar convened his 3 marquises, and the 3rd one finally walks on stage. I apologize in advance because she steals every scene she's in from here to the end. Mist Bloom. The only marquis with a human face, and what a face. 7 white foxtails, fox ears, 7th rank, and an innate charm ability that turned crowds into puddles, which she managed politely by keeping half her face veiled behind a tail in public, the way you'd holster a weapon. Under the charm, and this is the part everyone missed, a mind like an abacus dipped in perfume. She ran her own faction, protected her own people, and had spent years being underestimated by colleagues who couldn't see past the tails. The 3rd marquis, stone-hide behemoth, elephant head, tusks, temper like dry grassland, strongest of the 3 and desperate for everyone to know it, despised her. She filed his contempt under useful. The king's briefing was short. The egg is on that beast city. It has hatched. The thunder beast is now 7th rank. I will have it. But the city's master is unknown, and its beast is 8th rank, so we probe first, we trade if we must, and no one provokes them. Then he sent his 3 marquises to my gates as a delegation, with Leaf and Bryn dragged along as native guides over their audible objections. Their visit to my city was the best comedy this valley had seen in decades. I say that as the straight man of the piece. It started at Heavenly Gate Tower, where my staff informed 3 of the most feared beings in the region that entry required a pass, a processing fee of 1 crystal each, and an uncovered face. Mistbloom paid, sweetly, then tried the veil rule as an opening, dropped the tail from her face at the clerk's request, and short-circuited my entire gate shift. The poor clerk stood there with his soul leaving through his ears. Then my gate captain, Wen Yue, met her charm with the counter-technique of a true professional. He stabbed himself in the thigh to stay sober. He apologized for the delay. Then he drank a healing potion from his monthly benefits ration while maintaining eye contact with the middle distance. Mist Bloom, watching a mid-rank human no-sell her face at the cost of a leg, was more impressed than she'd been by anything in years. She said so later, repeatedly, at parties. Stonehide Behemoth went next and slapped his crystal down hard enough to crack my counter. My staff, per policy, invoiced him for the counter. 10 crystals, sir. The Marquis's trunk curled with rage. 20 military crossbows creaked in unison from the gate towers. 1 leg of my 16-meter spider descended past the window and rested, delicately, on the pavement beside him, like a hostess indicating a coat rack. He paid for the counter. He paid the entry fee. He filled out the visitor form, occupation, purpose of visit, while my clerk's hand shook only slightly. Night Prowler, 3rd in line, watched all of this, paid quietly, wrote neatly, revised his threat assessment of my city upward in ways that would matter later. Then they walked the commercial street to my highlands, past glass windows and hot bun steam and streetlights. 3 apex predators getting quieter and quieter were shown into my reception hall for the main event. The reception went in 3 movements, and I conducted all 3. Movement 1. Hospitality. My maids served star tea, dried sweet potato, and a plate of steamed buns. I delayed my entrance by exactly the length of time it takes 3 proud carnivores to crack. Mistbloom tried one piece of dried sweet potato behind her tail. Her 7 tails all twitched at once, which I'm told is the fox equivalent of a standing ovation. Night Prowler annexed half the plate under diplomatic immunity. Stonehide Behemoth held out on principle for a full minute, then his trunk moved on its own and swept the remainder. By the time I walked in, the fiercest delegation in the region was sitting in front of empty plates trying to look like predators. Movement 2. The Probe. Mistbloom took the lead, dropped the Veiltail entirely, and turned the full charm on me. I want to be fair to her. It was a beautifully calibrated attack. Warm, professional, completely deniable. The trouble was arithmetic. My stats had been compounding through every taming and every evolution since the turtle was palm-sized. Her ability rolled over me like warm weather rolls over a mountain. I complimented the tea. Behind me, though, I heard Sulan's breathing change and 2 invisible bodyguards shift their weight because the splash of that charm was swamping everyone who wasn't me. So I let a thread of my aura off the leash, 1 breath's worth. The room went still the way deep water goes still. 3 7th-rank Marqueses turned the color of salt. Night Prowler's hand locked on the table edge. Stonehide Behemoth's legs, I'm reliably informed by a smug, invisible witness, shook under him. Mistbloom put her tail back over her face, slowly, like reholstering. Her eyes over the top of it recalculated me from mark to hazard to, interestingly, exit route. I reeled the aura back in and apologized for the draft. Movement 3, business. They wanted their Thunder Spirit beast, and the phrasing, our stolen egg, gave me the opening I'd been waiting all season to use. Stolen, I agreed, was a strong word, and also accurate, since my people had recovered the egg from luggage dropped by fleeing intruders in my own city, picked up, legally, on my own pavement. And in any case, the egg no longer existed. There was only Little Z, a 7th-rank spirit beast, which is to say, a person-grade asset, and I don't sell people. I let them see the wolf through the window, 40 meters of purple lightning doing zoomies around my back garden. I watched 3 Marquises absorb the fact that the retirement plan they'd come to repossess now outranked 2 of them. Then I sold them salt instead, or rather, bought it. 10 reception halls worth of raw salt ore, priced against my water, vegetables, star tea, goods, and their eyes did the same arithmetic every buyer's eyes do in my hall. This trade is robbery, and I must have it. They took the deal home for royal approval. They took something else, too. On the way out, Mistbloom ran a full commercial tour of my street. She bought milk tea, discovered it, bought more milk tea, then biscuits, roasted sweet potato, glassware. By dusk, the 3 most feared beings in the valley were walking home laden like festival shoppers, their 2 flunkies buried under crates. The wolf and the elephant carried their own milk tea. They didn't trust the flunkies with it. Rithar approved the salt trade in 1 royal syllable, and the convoys began the next day. His workers hauled ore to my gate by the ton. My end of the logistics needed a hauler. So I evolved my tricolor lizard to level 7. It became the 5-colored lizard, 32 meters of prismatic monster with mirror-faceted scales, a talent for regrowing bone that settled into my own skeleton as a pleasant side effect, and the personality of an enormous toddler. I fitted its back with glass cargo containers. It hauled salt mountains daily, wagging as it worked. I stood there watching a mythical beast do freight runs and heard my own thought arrive with terrible clarity. Every animal I raise becomes a truck eventually. The turtle carries a city. The eagle is about to become an airline. The serpent, will get there, is a refrigerator. My legend in this world will be logistics, and honestly, I've made peace with it. Logistics wins wars. Ask anyone who lost one. The salt itself needed science, because raw Wasteland salt was gray, bitter, and mildly toxic. I ran the old world process in my workshop, with Lynn assisting. Grind the ore, dissolve, filter through cloth thrice, then through charcoal for the toxins. Boil down. My pan yielded pale green crystals that tasted, for the first time in this world's recorded history, like clean salt and nothing else. Lynn tried a crystal, puckered like a hoisted drawstring bag. got a floating sphere of drinking water delivered to her lips by a very entertained employer. I stood up a purification workshop within the week. Green salt went on sale at 5 yuan a gin, ration carded so no one could corner it, at roughly a tenth of what the gray bitterness used to cost. The market line on Salt Day wrapped the block. Wars have been fought over less salt than my citizens now put on eggs. Between shipments, the marquise kept finding excuses to visit, which was the plan. Night Prowler watched my 5-colored lizard empty a salt mountain into cargo crates with its tongue and updated his files again. Stonehide Behemoth sulked magnificently and bought milk tea in bulk on every trip, in secret, via Flunky. And Mistbloom came back once, alone, with an invitation. The Beast King requested my presence at a banquet in the inner city, just me, plus companions of my choosing. Everyone in my council had an opinion about walking into the den of an 8th-rank body thief. I had one too. I said yes. I told the kitchen to pack dinner, which turned out to be the single most devastating decision available to me, though I only meant it as food safety. We rolled up to the inner city that evening in the full kit: glass carriage, lizard drawn, 12-moon wolf outriders, lantern beetles blazing, because when you dine with kings, you bring your own weather. Sulan beside me in the blue gown, Wei Li and Li Lin riding footmen with the dinner boxes, Lin and Tong Hua invisible at the axles. The streets of 10,000 Demon City stopped to watch us pass, 50,000 people who had never seen a lit carriage. Mist Bloom met us at the palace doors and walked us in past a court holding its breath. Rathar received us from a stone throne sized for his 5 meters, flanked by Stonehide Behemoth and Night Prowler, with a banquet table already laid. I looked at the spread the way you look at a museum exhibit. Torn, raw meat, some of it recently ambulatory, one dish plainly scorched black on purpose. The Beast King grabbed a slab with his claws and ate it in a bite by way of hospitality. My maids opened the boxes. Meat buns, stir-fried cabbage, sweet potato stew, wheat porridge, still steaming. The smell walked out across that hall like a diplomatic incident. I watched the Beast Court's collective attention leave their king's table and defect to mine. Rathar chewed his raw slab slower and slower, eyeing my porridge, and Mistbloom simply gave up pretense and relocated to within serving distance. Never underestimate the strategic payload of a bun. I stay saying it. Nobody listens until they've seen a throne room surrender to one. The negotiation, when it finally surfaced through the food, was short and ugly in the most fascinating way. Rathar wanted the Thunder Spirit Beast. I declined, again, with numbers. A 7th-rank Spirit Beast is a 7th-rank power, I said. You know exactly what you're asking me to hand across this table. He went silent, and I watched something older than this body calculate behind his eyes. Then the dying king made the offer I genuinely did not see coming. An equivalent exchange, he said. The Thunder Spirit Beast, for Mist Bloom. The hall stopped. Every tail on Mist Bloom's back stood on end at once. She looked at her king, the throne she'd served for over 20 years. Understood in real time, in front of the court, that she was inventory. 7th rank for 7th rank, he said, as if reading a manifest. A fair trade. I watched her face do the whole journey. Shock, fury. Then, because that mind never stops working even mid-betrayal, the cold sorting of her actual options. Her family lived in his city. Her subordinates and their families, hundreds of them, lived in his city. Refused the king, and every one of them became leverage. She had no cards, and everyone at the table knew the deck. So she lifted her chin and set terms anyway, and this is the moment I decided I'd been right about her. If I am goods, she said, then the goods come with freight. My family leaves with me. My subordinates and their households leave with me. Every one who chooses it. Rathar, who was already mentally wearing my wolf, agreed without hesitation, which told Night Prowler, watching from the side, everything he ever needed to know about his own future value to that throne. I saw him file it. Kings who sell one marquee have priced them all. And me. I looked at a 7th-rank powerhouse with a genius for commerce being discarded by a ruler too far gone to notice what he was giving away. I did the math he expected, beast for beastwoman, asset for asset. Then I did the math he didn't. I agreed to the trade. 8 days for her to settle affairs, my wolf for his fox, delivery on the 8th morning. On the carriage ride out, Mistbloom sat across from me with her tails still bristled. asked, half joking and fully not, whether I wasn't afraid I'd just bought a spy. Chin don't strike me as stupid, I said, which from me is a love letter to someone's intellect. She laughed for the first time that whole evening, a real one, unarmored, and then promised me a parting gift. A grand one, she said, with a smile that should have triggered my danger sense. It did, actually, faintly. I ignored it because I wanted to see what she'd do. Mistbloom's grand gifts, it turns out, deserve their own security classification. The 8 days ran on 2 tracks, and I'll give you both. Track 1, mine, in the open. Salt convoys doubled. My Xuanwu market absorbed the shopping traffic of a 50,000-soul city discovering fair prices. 10,000 demons. City's ordinary residents had spent their lives under a beastman aristocracy. Now they walked my lit streets in careful crowds. They ate buns. They bought green salt with ration cards like everyone else. And they asked my staff over and over the same quiet question. Is it true anyone can live here? My intake clerks smiled a lot that week. Track 2, hers, in the dark. Mistbloom did her packing. She polled her faction honestly, no pressure, and 223 beastmen chose exile with her, 3 of her 6 vice-marquises among them. With families, the column came to 1,563 souls. My chronically understaffed workshops heard that number and lit celebratory candles. She sorted her assets, said her goodbyes, and then, on her last night in the valley, committed one final act of professional offboarding that I want framed in gold. She robbed the king. Specifically, she slipped into Rathar's private plantation behind the palace, the garden where he hoarded the valley's only healthy greenery, and stole his tree. His one thriving tree, a big, handsome thing he'd kept alive for years while the rest of his pots withered. Dug it up, roots and soil, wrapped it in hides like furniture, had her people carry it out under the Night Watch's charmed noses. When I say I hired well this season, I am underselling it. Delivery morning, I came to collect her in style, because style is a load-bearing element of my foreign policy. I flew into the inner city on Little Feather, 80 meters of Firebird, with Little Z riding along. Set down in the palace square while their patrols had a collective crisis. The handoff itself was the hardest thing I did all arc, and I want that on the record. Little Z understood the words trade and stay, looked at me with the single most betrayed expression in the recorded history of animals. Had to be told, out loud, in front of the beast court, to go with the nice king. What I told it privately, ear to fur, was different. Be patient, eat well, I'll come get you very soon. The wolf held my eyes for a long second, then walked to Rathar's side and sat, crackling faintly, like a storm agreeing to be leashed for now. Rathar looked at his prize the way misers look at keys. Mistbloom stepped up onto my eagle. And then she turned on that high perch, looked down at her king of 20 years in front of his whole assembled court, and delivered the grand gift. Of the 5 salt mountains, she announced, sweet as temple bells, Beiyi Peak was granted to her by Marquis right, hers absolutely. And she was gifting it, effective immediately, to Lord Li Wei of Xuanwu City. The court made a sound like a tide going out. Stonehide Behemoth started forward with an objection and got frozen mid-syllable by his own king's raised claw, because Rathar, whatever else was rotting, could still read aboard. Refuse the gift, insult me, lose the wolf. He inclined his head tectonically and pronounced Beiyi Peak mine, and I watched him, already filing the obvious recovery plan behind his eyes. The mountain stands in my valley. When my new body is strong, I'll simply take it back. A fair plan, a patient plan. Which is why I moved the mountain. We were airborne over the valley mouth, Mistbloom still mid-goodbye to her old skyline, when I told Littlefeather to hold position. Reached down with the talent I'd been saving since the 3rd transformation. Gravity manipulation, from me. Earth force, from a turtle the size of a weather system, together, aimed at Beiyi Peak. The mountain groaned, the valley floor cracked in a ring, and then an entire peak of salt, reserves enough for 100,000 people for 100 years, tore loose from the earth that had held it since the world was young, and floated, up, sideways, across the sky of 10,000 Demons City, trailing dust like a comet learning to walk, while 50,000 people below forgot, collectively, how words work. Mistbloom made a sound I will treasure until I die. It wasn't a scream. It was the noise of a very composed person's entire model of reality being asked to lift and lifting. I ferried Beiyi Peak across the sky, dropped it through the opened glass dome, set it down on the turtle's back near the tail, where the shell took the weight with one long, unbothered flex. My city gained a new district that afternoon, the one that seasons dinner. Sulan, who had watched the entire operation from the highlands with her arms crossed, met me on landing and asked if I could possibly, just once, acquire an asset without redrawing maps. The maps were wrong anyway, I told her. She wrote that down. I've since seen it quoted back at foreign envoys, deadpan, as official municipal policy. Rathar watched his valley lose a finger from his own wall. I'm told he stood there a long time. I'm told nobody dared stand near him. File the image. It matures. Mistbloom's people came up the ramp that evening and through the next day. 1,563 beastmen and their families, carts and bundles and wide eyes, processed street by street into housing, the biggest single intake in my city's history. My machine, drilled by every rescue before it, absorbed them without a seam. Her 3 vice marquises got jobs matched to their talents inside the week. One to the coin printing works, one to the military workshop, and the snake-headed one, Rion, assigned to shadow Mistbloom herself, with a note in my ledger about a fire brigade I'd be founding around him later. Their families discovered taps, baths, buns, and school in the usual order, with the usual tears at the usual stations, and Mistbloom herself moved into the palace's South Hall and produced, in her first 72 hours, my favorite onboarding montage of the entire year. She discovered the toothbrush and charcoal powder and reported her own minty status to the breakfast table like a scientific breakthrough. She discovered hot baths and had to be scheduled around. She got ambushed by the morning quake of the turtle standing up, went full alert, tails flared, in the dining room. Had to be talked down by a 14-year-old with a soup ladle. And then she took over my commercial street as manager, the job I'd hired her for. Within days, I understood the scale of what Rathar had thrown away. She upsold visiting merchants with volume discounts she invented on the spot. She caught a night intruder over the trade quarter with a courtesy warning that scared him more than arrest would have. She priced fruit like a poet and haggled like a landslide. My revenue curve developed a distinct fox-shaped bend. Her stolen tree, the king's tree, turned out to be the quietest treasure of the whole arc. I walked around it once, touched the milky sap where a branch had snapped, and my memory of another world lit up like a switchboard. Rubber. A rubber tree. I tamed it on the spot, evolved it to level 7, and inherited its talent, elastic deformation, which means, I need you to picture this with the reverence it deserves. My arms now stretch. I stood in my own garden, extending a fist 4 meters to poke a fence post, grinning like a schoolboy, while 2 maids watched their lord commit cartoon physics in broad daylight. Somewhere out there is a world where that's a famous pirate. Here, it's a city lord with a salt mountain and no adult supervision. The tree itself bloomed under the star domain, bees moved in, and industrial rubber entered my future in flower pots. Gaskets, seals, tires someday. The king hoarded a treasure for years without once asking what it was. That's the difference between us, condensed into one plant. Now, the wolf. Rathar caged little Z in his plantation, in the crater where his tree used to be, black iron bars, 4 braziers. Set about brewing the sedatives his ritual needed, because a 7th-rank host can't be taken awake, and stunning one by force risks damaging the goods. The ingredients for a 7th-grade sedative are not pantry items. He gave himself 2 months to gather them, and his rotting body 2 months of careful, calm, unhurried decline, nothing rash, nothing stressful. I gave him 4 days. On the 4th night, a fleck of red crossed the stars above 10,000 Demon City, too high for any watch to hear. Little Z felt me coming, the way storms feel each other. The wolf stood up in its cage, poured every spark it had into one surge, briefly touched 8th-rank output. Melted its prison into glowing slag around its own paws. Then silk lines dropped out of the black sky, 30 strands, 50, my spider reeling from my eagle's back. The thunder spirit beast rose off the ground and into the night like a fish being landed by heaven, and was gone before the slag cooled. Rithar felt the absence from inside his palace, mid-meditation. He came out at a speed his body billed him for later, and found braziers, iron puddles, and sky. And then, because rage is expensive at his age, the account came due on the spot. His aura guttered. The 8th rank, the threshold he'd held for a century across 3 bodies, slid out from under him in one surge of fury. The Beast King of 10,000 Demon City stood in his ruined garden at the peak of 7th rank, dying faster now, and he heard his own 2 remaining marquises approaching to ask what the noise was. He hid it. Sent them away without letting them close, because a beast court that smells a weak king does not send flowers. And alone in the dark, he said my name to the empty garden, and made himself a promise about me. Good. I collect those. And before anyone files a complaint about my business ethics, let's audit the man once, cleanly. He farms his own citizens. He sold a loyal marquis across a dinner table like a crate. His grand project is stealing the body of my dog. He can hold his grudge. He can hold it in line, behind Future City and Holy Sun City and the Blood Moon. My grudge department has a wait list, and it clears the list eventually. Everyone in this story has seen the list clear. Little Zai came home to me before dawn, exhausted, crackling, smug. I fed it points until the purple eyes closed under my tea tree, back where it belongs. My final ledger for the 10,000 Demons arc. 1 7th rank Fox executive, 1,500 workers and their families, a flying mountain of salt, a rubber tree, the wolf I never really gave away, and a mortal enemy on a countdown clock somewhere behind us in the sand, shopping for anybody strong enough to carry his hatred to my gate. Some weeks just cook. One scene from that stretch I skipped past, and it matters, because it's the moment Mistbloom switched sides in her heart, well before the paperwork. She came back to my city alone, mid-week, officially to deliver the banquet invitation, and Manhwa drew escort duty from the gate. Picture the pair of them crossing my outer city, 7 swaying foxtails beside a masked girl in ghost armor. Mistbloom, who reads people for a living, spending the whole walk mining my ice blade for intelligence with the delicacy of a jeweler. She admired the armor. Advanced grade, yes. Made by your lord personally, yes. Interesting, said the fox, and then, silk casual. One more question. Is he married? Manhwa stopped walking for exactly half a step. Anyone else would have missed it. Mistbloom, being Mistbloom, catalogued it, smiled behind her tail, said, "How nice," to no one in particular, and resumed walking with her mood visibly improved. My escort filed a report that evening that was 2 sentences long and radiated cold from the paper. I have wonderful staff. I gave them all a fruit bonus and asked no follow-up questions, because a wise commander knows which intelligence files to leave sealed. But here's the part of that visit I actually keep. In my study, invitation delivered, business done, Mistbloom lingered at the window over the lamplit streets, tails slowing. For 1 unguarded minute, the Merchant Queen mask came all the way off. She'd stood on her own walls the night before, she said, watched my city glow across the flats, the star domain over the dome, thousands of lamps under it, and she'd realized she couldn't remember the last time 10,000 Demon City had built anything except higher walls around the same darkness. Then she caught herself, reassembled the charm like armor, and made a joke about milk tea. 4 days later, her king sold her across a dinner table. She landed in the one city in the Wasteland she'd already, privately, chosen. Sometimes the universe files its paperwork late, but correct. The pickup morning had one more grace note too, one I didn't clock the significance of until later. While the court watched the handoff, Rithar's eyes rested on Littlefeather for a long, strange moment. I felt something feather-light brush across my eagle. Not force, not threat. More like a jeweler's loop passing over a stone. He was reading its soul, I understood afterward, measuring the wavelength. Pricing a backup body, right there in the square, in front of me, with his valley's whole nobility assembled, because a dying king window shops at funerals. I logged the sensation, said nothing, and added 1 line to the Rithar file. He doesn't stop, ever. Plan accordingly. The last domestic note from the transition week belongs to Rian, the snake-headed vice marquis, because his first errand set the tone for every beastman who followed him up my ramp. Mistbloom sent him ahead with her luggage, and the luggage included 1 item wrapped in hides, 6 meters long, that he and 2 colleagues carried up the highlands like pallbearers with a secret. The stolen royal tree, of course. But Rian didn't know that. I unwrapped it in the small square, poked the milky sap, and cheerfully identified the contraband as priceless. The snake man's face cycled through loyalty, horror, advertisements, and awe in 4 seconds flat. His marquis had exited her old life by robbing the throne on her way out the door, and I was delighted about it. That her new employer's response was to be delighted. Welcome to Xuanwu City, Rian. The management style takes adjusting. He adjusted at speed. He took his post on the commercial street under Mist Bloom. I've already measured him for a fire brigade captaincy he doesn't know about yet. On his first market day, he was heard telling a nervous Beastman family that the rules here are strange, but the rules are real. Best one-line review my city has ever received. I've had poets try. We left the valley with the holds full of salt, and the city pointed at Night Moon City, home of the vampire lords, home, more to the point, of one runaway vampire princess on my roster. And the sky delivered the endgame guests before we'd made half the distance. 5 figures riding the wind caught up with us at dusk. Ivy and Mila, back as promised. Rowan, the Eagle Courier, our best snack customer, now on escort duty. Gwyn, the proud green-haired inspector, whose one-sentence belief system was aboard for its execution. And leading them, riding her own summoned winds, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who introduced herself at my gate with magnificent understatement as Althea, a traveler. Althea was the 3rd elder of the Oasis, one of its 4 rulers, 7th rank, wind element, and Ivy's own master, the woman who'd saved and raised her. The hidden city had heard my legend through its own couriers and its own cat, had sent a head of state to check my vegetables, undercover. I knew who she was before her second cup of tea. My ghosts are thorough. I let the incognito stand because guests investigate more honestly when they think you're not watching. Their arrival tour ran the standard curve, and I never tire of the standard curve. Day 1, composure, entry passes, the mandatory weapons check that scandalized Gwyn on principle. Then the commercial street at night, glass lamps blazing, and the composure developed cracks. They bought pearl milk tea, 5 cups on the elder's crystal. I'm told the 3rd elder of the Oasis drank half of hers in silence, and then examined the glass straw like an artifact of a fallen empire. They ate sour and spicy noodles at 30 crystals a bowl, choked on the price, paid, ate, and stopped complaining mid-slurp, which is the standard trajectory. They slept at the Samsung Tower on real mattresses, and Gwyn, patriot of the Sky City, lay awake in comfort, having doctrinal difficulties. Althea, being a ruler, tried a professional shortcut that first night, a quiet aerial survey of my restricted districts. She lifted off the commercial street after midnight and got, before she'd cleared the rooftops, a courtesy greeting from the darkness below. Mistbloom, on her new beat, tails swaying, suggesting sweetly that the honored senior come down before something regrettable interrupted her flight. A 7th rank elder, treed on her first night by my mall manager. The Oasis records will not reflect this, mine do. Morning brought the reunion proper. Jing was in the palace kitchen when the party arrived for breakfast. Ivy got hit at javelin velocity for the 2nd time in the story, and the table absorbed 2 more guests, and Mila announced her return by demanding her contractually promised blood before the porridge. I paid up. 1 drop, on my fingertip, into the fang zone, and the results exceeded projections. Her aura climbed on the spot, peak 5, wall, breakthrough. She stabilized at the 6th rank in front of the whole breakfast table, wings out, eyes blazing, taller, visibly taller. She measured herself against Ivy immediately, came up still short, and declared next time with the gravity of a war treaty. A 6th rank vampire princess, retained for 2 drops and a noodle tab. My acquisitions team remains undefeated. The Oasis women spent days doing what visitors to my city do, being dismantled by ordinariness. Rowan and Gwyn found the great market and discovered fruit. Apples at 1 yuan, pears, oranges, which they'd never seen, and Rowan ate hers peel and all until corrected, and then bought a bag with her entire converted savings. Gwyn, who had once tasted fruit as a near-religious event because the Oasis's orchard of a dozen trees fruited once a decade, stood in front of my fruit counter doing arithmetic that was visibly hurting her. Then they toured my orchard itself with me and Althea, 497 trees, wolves on guard, apples going out as army rations. I watched the 3rd elder of the Sky City look at ration fruit for soldiers and briefly close her eyes. Because here's what I'd learned about the Oasis by then, through Ivy and my own quiet files. The legend says paradise. The truth is 3 tiers of weathered planking floating in the freezing wind, hidden behind an elder's illusion. Every barrel of water hauled up from the ground at brutal cost, research plants dying in pots, children fed but never full, a whole existence held as one long, stubborn vigil over a single question. Why did the green world die, and can it come back? The Wasteland's last idealists going broke on hope at altitude. And then they'd flown over my walls and seen half a city covered in crops. Althea dropped the incognito in my study on the 4th day, laid out who she was. Asked me the only question the oasis really has. What is your method? How does green live here? And I gave her my very best honest shrug. Plants just survive here, honored elder. No idea why. Which is technically true if you don't count the star domain, the fertilizer program, the dome, the water grid, and me. I don't count those out loud for visiting governments. So I built us a deal instead of an interrogation. The Oasis sends its researchers to work in my city, full access to growing conditions their frozen attic could never offer. They share their herb library, the accumulated rare botany of the last idealists, which, incidentally, was exactly what Joe Fun's 4th-tier medicine research was starving for. And their agents get a contact point on my commercial street, rented at market rates, because friendship is friendship and rent is rent. Althea choked politely on my storefront prices, rallied, and shook on it. Everybody wins. And if you squint at the fine print, everybody wins is spelled with my initials, because researchers who move here tend to become citizens the way visitors become customers. Nobody annexes the Oasis. The Oasis just slowly discovers where its own center of gravity went. Around the edges of statecraft, the city kept compounding, and I'll give you the highlights reel at speed. My ice serpent evolved to level 7, 32 meters of proto-dragon with horn buds and rainbow scales. Got a 5-chamber cold storage carved around it, so yes, as prophesied, one of my mythical beasts is now the municipal refrigerator. It has never been happier. It sleeps in its own frost, like a dowager in furs. Its shed scales became freezer units for my new airline, which existed now, by the way, the Xuanwu number. Little feather fitted with 6 glass cabins under a windshield dome, 3 for passengers, 3 for freight. First route, Flying Bird City, 1 flight a week, staffed by trained attendants and guarded by soldiers. Captained by Lynn, who was issued 50 flight regulations and memorized 5. I audited her. She vanished for 2 days and came back word perfect and insufferable about it. The Wasteland's first commercial air service and the Howe family, when the inaugural schedule reached them, signed a standing cargo contract before the ink dried, because a 3-day bird relay had just become a half-day scheduled flight, and the Howe family's grand shopping expedition landed in the middle of all this, the biggest single trade of the year. It deserves its full scene, so here it comes. The Howe family's grand shopping expedition deserves its full scene too, because it was the biggest single trade of the year and the best sales performance I have ever witnessed from an employee. They arrived in force this time, a proper flying merchant caravan out of the Sky City, dozens of traders on giant birds with Shu Ming and Isolde at the head, Isolde having pestered her father for days for permission to come. They cleared my 3 gates like veterans, and Isolde hit the ground already ordering. Steamed buns first, meat and vegetable both, seconds immediately. Then milk tea, 2 rounds. Then the reception hall fruit plate, where she and her brother met pears and oranges for the first time in their lives and went through the samples like a customs inspection with feelings. Then, fed and compromised, they were handed to Mistbloom for the actual business, and I sat back and watched an artist work. The grain shop. Wheat flour at 10 crystals the gin, and the fox mentioned, idly, tail swaying, that bulk buyers got discounts, and mentioned, more idly, that stock was limited. Her shop assistant chimed the shortage on cue like a trained bird, and Shu Ming walked out committed to 200 gin. The sweet potato tanks, where the sibling conference lasted 4 seconds before surrender. The fruit shop, where a local customer had just stormed out calling 5 crystals an apple robbery. Isolde, Sky Royalty, raised on a mountain where a fruit was an event, heard the same price and physically could not process her luck. 600 pieces of fruit joined the manifest. Then Star Tea, regular and special grade, and when the special grade's providence came up, leaves of an 8th-rank sacred tree, Shu Ming thought of his father's stalled cultivation, breathed once. Bought at 1,000 crystals the gin without letting himself do the math twice. By the closing tally, their manifest had outgrown their birds. which is when Mistbloom, timing it like a duelist, mentioned that the Xuanwu number's free delivery threshold sat at 5,000 crystals and wasn't their total so temptingly close. They crossed the threshold on the spot with 3 jin of tea. My new airline's first commercial cargo run was thereby sold before the service had flown its first scheduled flight, to customers who thanked her for the privilege. I raised her salary that evening, preemptively, and told her why. The 7 tails did a slow, satisfied wave that I've come to recognize as the fox equivalent of a banked fire. Rathar traded that away for a wolf he couldn't keep. I'd have paid 2 mountains. And the flip side of the boom, because my market's gravity had started bending strangers' orbits. The wilderness merchants, Thorin and Keon, turned up again in the buyer crowd. My floor staff watched them work through the fruit shop with hungry eyes and a plan visible from across the room. Buy at my prices, haul to the far swamp cities, triple the coin. They loaded up and left happy. And that same week, 2 other freelancers got caught trying the same play in the wrong direction, buying my subsidized citizen goods at ration prices for resale outside. The difference between the 2 operations, for anyone taking notes on how my city works, is that Thorin bought at open market rates, which is called trade. I'll sell him fruit until his birds go bald. The ration counter is the covenant between me and my citizens, and the covenant is not export stock. Mistbloom wrote the distinction into market law by the weekend, posted it in plain script. Enforcement has since required exactly 0 hangings, because clear rules cheaply kept are the only crowd control that compounds. Meanwhile, in the palace kitchen, the brewing project entered its decisive phase and took the whole household with it. The knotweed had come up from the fields by the sackful. I chopped and mashed it, kneaded it into wheat flour with water, and rolled the mash into 100 little balls. I ran that production line with Jing at my elbow taking notes, and Lin drafted in as unskilled labor, which she protested until the rolling started and then defended her station jealously. The balls went into a glass basket on a bed of clean wheat straw, straw above, cloth wrapping after cloth wrapping around the whole thing. Then into a warm corner to sleep for 2 days. I fielded the same question from every single member of my household in turn. What is it? Answered honestly each time. Yeast, for wine, and received the same polite blank look each time, and savored it, because there are so few inventions left that still get me that look. 2 days later, Jing unwrapped the basket like a birthday, and found the balls furred over with pale bloom. She sounded the palace alarm on me. It's gone moldy. It's ruined. I explained that the mold was the entire point. The fur was a workforce, invisible little living things by the million, brewing on my behalf. This produced a household-wide philosophical crisis about invisible little living things in general, on our hands, in our food, in us. I lost an evening to microbiology remedial class for an audience whose most scientific member cooks by feel and whose most dangerous can freeze a lake. Jing demanded to know whether the tiny animals were friendly. Lin washed her hands 4 times and then ate with them anyway. The wheat went into the soak the next morning, plump and ready for the steamer, first mash of the Wasteland's first wine. That's where I'll leave the kitchen, mid-batch, because that's honestly where it stands as I tell you this. Some vintages you narrate, this one's still fermenting. 2 small windows into the city those weeks, one from below, one from above, because a chronicle that only shows the throne room is lying to you. From below, the day off. My Highland Guard ran a rotation, 2 members off duty per day. One morning it fell to Akemi and 2 of her girls, Wen and Su Yi, veterans of the Holy Sun escape. Faces half covered out of old habit, wandering my streets as civilians for the first time since their arrival. They had free tasting coupons for Jing's new ice drink shop, a trial day promotion the rabbit had invented herself, and they spent them like duchesses. Akemi, on expert testimony, recommended the pearl milk tea. Wen fell into hers with a sigh you could hear across the counter. Su Yi drew the tomato tea and pronounced it complicated, which in her dialect is 4 stars. Then they asked the prices for a return visit, heard the numbers, did the math against a guard's wage. The outing ended in the oldest scene in civilization, 3 lethal young women standing on a curb with empty cups, concluding, solemnly, that they were too poor for the mall. That payday was 9 days out, and that the vegetable smoothie could wait for a bonus. They kept their cups as souvenirs. All 3 cups are still in barracks use. My economy's greatest triumph is that my own special forces window shop it. From above, the airline's final countdown. The maiden flight of the Xuanwu number was scheduled 3 days out, Flying Bird City run, and the pieces clicked in daily. The Crafter sisters delivered 4 cold storage cabinets built from the ice serpent's shed scales, each the size of a wardrobe, 1 crystal a day to run. They went into the Eagle's freight cabin so my perishables could cross the sky garden fresh, the Wasteland's first cold chain. I dare you to find me a more romantic sentence. The service crew drilled boarding, seating, and the fine art of reassuring a first-time flyer that the enormous bird is a colleague. Lin ran takeoff and landing rehearsals in full armor until the tower crews stopped flinching, wearing the bearing of a woman who had personally lobbied against the no fighting aboard rule and lost. And she brought me a recruit. She'd spotted, on her patrols, a beastman from the Mist Bloom intake gliding between the outer city rooftops on wide gray wings, a flyer, commuting to his workshop shift the scenic way. "Can I have him for the Air Force?" she asked, with the exact energy of a child pointing at a puppy. "Background check first," I said, and Lynn's file came back clean by dinner, a quiet cargo hauler with a family and no debts. And so my Air Force doubled to 2, pending the gentleman's own enthusiastic yes. He asked whether the position came with the flight meals. "It comes with the flight meals, the Wasteland's first aviation labor negotiation, settled over buns, like everything else in my country." I stood on the 5th terrace the evening before the maiden flight and watched the lamplighters work, the Eagle preening beside its boarding scaffold, the market closing out its last customers, wolves changing shift at the orchard gate. A year ago, the entire national infrastructure was a shed, a snare wire, and a turtle in a girl's 2 hands. Ask me again why I count taps and biscuits as victories. Actually, don't. Just stand here a minute. The city answers for me. The orchard inspection with Althea aboard was the day the Oasis's heart actually changed hands, so let me give it to you whole. It started as my routine, carriage down from the highlands, moonwolves in harness. The Oasis trio invited along on a whim that was not a whim, because I wanted the third elder to see my agriculture from inside the fence, not over it. Lee met us at the orchard gate, my wall slave turned orchard keeper, and delivered his report standing straight as a mast. 326 apple trees, 153 orange, 18 pear. Every tree numbered on wooden tags in his own careful charcoal, a filing system he'd invented unasked in his first week. The trees were his, and his things would be in order. I praised the tags. The man grew an inch. Behind me, I heard Gwyn whisper the tree count to herself twice, like a number that wouldn't hold still. We walked the rows. Fruit hung heavy where the late bloomers were finishing. Pickers moved with ladders and baskets. The wolf pack drowsed between the trunks on guard rotation. At some point, the Moonwolf King ambled over and flopped in front of me for his tribute scratch, a silver monster the size of a cart rolling like a puppy in the grass, while 3 visitors from the Sky City stood very still. Then Althea asked her careful questions: soil, watering, cycles. I answered the safe halves and shrugged the rest. Then I gave the day its real payload, casually, over my shoulder, while signing Lee's expansion request. "Apples to the city guard as rations," I told Sulan. 1 per soldier every 3 days, Highland Guard, daily. I watched the sentence land on the visitors. Fruit as rations for soldiers. Rowan said, out loud, in pure reflex, that she was so envious, and meant it from the marrow. Gwyn laughed, the small, wrong laugh of a person whose scale just broke. And Althea went silent in the way rulers go silent when they're recosting their entire national strategy against a stranger's snack budget. On the ride back, I doubled the orchard's fenced ground with 1 stamp of my foot, seedling requisitions to follow. Nobody in the carriage said anything at all for a while, and the silence was doing my diplomacy for me at a rate no envoy could match. The contact point negotiation, by contrast, was pure comedy, and I enjoyed every crystal of it. Althea raised it near the end of her stay. The Oasis would like a small permanent station in my city, for agents passing through, message relays, the usual. "Of course," I said, warmly, "on the commercial street, rented." Her first flinch. 200 yuan a month for the small storefront, I said. She recovered, elder smooth, and inquired about simply purchasing a storefront outright as a hedge against a landlord's whims. Very prudent, very Oasis. 50,000, I said, same warmth. She coughed on her own tea, actual cough, the composure of a head of state briefly leaving through the window, and asked me to repeat the figure. I did, and added, helpfully, that it was good value at twice the price given foot traffic. She said she would consider it. She is still considering it. The consideration itself is now a running agenda item between our governments. I look forward to it the way other rulers look forward to hostage exchanges. And Rowan, hearing a contact point might exist, immediately volunteered to staff it. Permanently. With her whole chest in front of her own elder. Gwyn had to talk her down, while everyone pretended not to notice that the Oasis's field corps was already, functionally, half mine and fully fed. Which left one last piece of that visit, the quietest one. Gwyn, the patriot. The girl whose spine was built out of one sentence. The Oasis is the finest city in the world. Who'd argued that sentence against Mila across a whole wasteland? I watched my city take her belief apart. Not cruelly, just daily. The market did some of it, the faucets did some, the bathhouse did more than she'd admit. The sentence was down to one load-bearing wall by week's end. The last blow was coming for it, at a schoolroom window, though none of us knew the schedule yet. Because the idealists were not losing an argument to me. They were finding a working prototype of their own dream, parked on a turtle, selling noodles. Hold that thought. The window is about to open. And then came the school day. I want to close on this beat because empires are loud and this was quiet, and it's worth more than everything loud in the story. Althea's trio, wandering the outer city on their own, turned down Li Chu Street and stopped outside a window, caught by a sound the wasteland doesn't make. Children, dozens of them, chanting characters in chorus. They pressed up to the glass, 3 visitors from the sky, and looked into my school. Rows of desks, fed, clean, unafraid kids in whole clothes. And at the podium, chalk in hand, Li Chu, the last daughter of a murdered family, the girl who once walked out to my turtle expecting to die politely for people who wanted her gone, now standing in front of a classroom as a teacher, with children who called her name in the street. While the Oasis women stood there, a mother arrived mid-lesson holding her daughter's hand, having heard a rumor she needed to test in person. She asked Li Chu whether it was true school was free. She asked twice. Couldn't hold the answer the first time. Free for every citizen's child, Li Chu said, the city lord's standing gift. The woman signed her daughter in on the spot with shaking hands, and the little girl, Alice, promised her mother at the door to be very good. My school's roll grew by 1, which is the unit that matters. Althea came to my study shaken and asked the honest question of a ruler who counts every hand. Why school? Children can work. In the wasteland, every pair of hands feeds the day. Knowledge changes fate, I told her. Feed the body first, then the mind, and the next generation outbuilds us both. Sharpen the axe, and you lose no time cutting wood. She sat with that for a long, silent moment, a woman who'd spent decades triaging survival against hope. And then she asked, quietly, the question I'd been gardening toward since her second cup of tea. Would Xuanwu City take the Oasis's children? The 100 kids their floating attic could barely feed, let alone teach. All of them, I said. Send every one. She stood up and bowed to me, an elder of the Sky City, bowing over a school. I stood and returned it, full depth, because some transactions deserve ceremony even when both parties are ruthless. I'll show you my half of the ruthlessness in a moment, but let the bow stand first. 100 children were about to sleep warm, eat full, and learn letters. That's real. It's the realest thing in this entire chronicle, and I'd have done it at a loss. And, my builder's face noted, in the same breath, without shame, it is also not at a loss. The 100 children of the Oasis, growing up in my streets, my school, my story, means that in one generation, the last idealist successors are mine. The Sky City folds into my map without a single arrow leaving a quiver. The warm hand and the counting hand. Both real, both mine. I stopped apologizing for that somewhere around the second city I absorbed. The people sleeping safe under my dome have yet to lodge a complaint. So, stand with me on the 5th terrace one last time and look at the scoreboard, 1 year deep. I started in a borrowed shed, hiding from a food tax, with a stranger's last turtle in my hands. The turtle is now a mountain range that walks. On its back, under a glass sky, a city with running water, paper money in every pocket, Streetlights, hot noodles, a bank, a bathhouse, a school with a morning bell, an orchard under Wolfgard, a flying salt mountain, and the Wasteland's first airline. Around my table I keep a water queen who chose herself once and everyone else forever after. A ghost archer whose marks I still say are beautiful. A mad alchemist in a blast suit. A fox executive with 7 tails and a revenue curve. An ice blade who learned to plan on living. A vampire princess 2 centimeters from her dreams. A resistance commander with a timeline instead of a death wish. 2 crafter sisters who build refrigerators out of dragon scale. And a rabbit-eared girl who once didn't know the word full. She runs a drink shop now. She feeds my palace. She falls asleep mid-sentence planning tomorrow's menu next to the sister she waited 4 years for. The last time I opened my panel, the lifespan line read north of 5,000 years. I intend to spend them exactly like this. Gardening, in the largest available sense of the word. And the horizon is not done with me, which is precisely how I like my horizons. Somewhere behind us, in a valley down one mountain, a beast king rots on a countdown, 7th rank and falling, brewing his transfer drugs and wearing my name like a brand on whatever he has instead of a heart. He needs a new body within months, or the dark takes him. Every candidate body between here and his grave now has my city's shadow standing over it. He will come. Dying things with 3 centuries of practice always come. Somewhere ahead, a night-dark city of 70,000 waits under vampire lords, an 8th rank peak patriarch on its throne. My Mila gets quieter every day we sail toward her family because princesses who run have fathers who count. We'll be parking a mountain on their doorstep inside the week, and under a year out, the blood moon rises. Every dead thing sleeping under this wasteland opens its eyes on the same night, everywhere, at once. All my walls and wolves and noodles get audited by the oldest force on this planet. The landlords of the world, the Holy Land and its 8th rank conference still think that night is their problem to manage and the map is theirs to divide. They'll learn. Everyone does, eventually, one bowl of noodles at a time. Ask me sometime how a dead soldier ends up owing an empire to a palm-sized turtle. The answer hasn't changed, and it never will. Someone hungry shared her food with a stranger in a shed, and the stranger decided the whole world was going to pay her back. We're still collecting. The line starts at the gate, passes are 1 crystal, and the noodles are worth it.